It's the Awesemo Super Bowl strategy show presented by No House Advantage. Guys, it's the Super Bowl. We finally made it. It feels like we haven't had football in forever. I can't remember the last time we did a show. I don't even remember what happened in the conference championship games. I know the Chiefs are in it. I know the Buccaneers are in it. I barely remember most of the other playoff games. I remember there was a lot of bad playoff games, but it feels like they were forever ago. Guys, as we're getting started, don't forget, like the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and now I'll finally bring in my co-host here, Kyle Dvorchak. Kyle, I'm going to put you on the spot here because Jordan, the producer, before, as soon as I got into the Zoom chat before, he right away said to me, who's winning, and he wants to know whether the coin toss is going to be heads or tails. So I'm gonna put this on you right now. Who wins the game today, and heads or tails for the coin toss?
Let's go double fade the public. I believe Jordan said it looked like the public money was coming in on tails. I mean, if it's a 50-50 bet, but the public money is all on tails, we back heads all the way. I'll have a few units on it, honestly. And then, let's just go right back to fading the public. No, I'm not betting either of these. One, I think the Chiefs are going to win, but the spread would likely account for that. I don't think the biggest game of the year is going to have a soft line. So, I don't know, heads and Chiefs.
It's kind of interesting because there was a fairly significant line move that you don't see in the Super Bowl. The line opened up at Chiefs minus 3.5. It moved to 3 as of this morning, and it's pretty rare that you'll see a line move like that in the Super Bowl, maybe 4.5 to 5 points, but 3 is a really key number. So it's pretty surprising to me to see the line move in that kind of way, because that is the most significant line move I could ever remember from a Super Bowl. I agree with you, though. I don't have a really strong lean. I think the Chiefs are slightly more likely to win. I'm going to have to say that just to outrage Jordan behind the glass, because he wanted me to come out with conviction and just say, who's the lock to win today? Nobody. The Chiefs are a little bit more likely to win, and hopefully it's a competitive game because we haven't really had a whole lot of those in the playoffs. Guys, we do have a giveaway going on. If you check out the pinned tweet on Awesemo_com, enter our Super Bowl giveaway for a free year of Awesemo Plus Platinum. That is a $1,000 value. Follow the instructions on the graphic and predict whether Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes will have more passing yards. One random winner among the correct guesses will be selected. We also have an Instagram giveaway running, so make sure to give our handle at Awesemo_com on Instagram. Follow us there, and you have a chance to win 3 free months of Awesemo Plus. So let's talk about this now, because I think that it's the question that's up there, and there's a pretty clear, more likely answer who has more passing yards between Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady. But given how this is going to work, with most people probably selecting Patrick Mahomes to win, would that make you more inclined to go with Tom Brady? Or would you just go with Mahomes, who's the more likely of the two?
I mean, yeah, it's like you said, Mahomes is the more likely of the two, but you got to think a little bit of game theory there. So, I think probably in that sense, there's some efficacy to going Tom Brady, just for being contrarian, essentially. It's not that we think we're awfully more likely to be right, but the difference between them, both are incredible passers. Both were top 3, I believe, in passing yards in the regular season. Mahomes, slight edge. Game theory, though, maybe you go with a Tom Brady there.
And how about this? Let's throw it into the chat, too. Guys, how about you tell us who's going to win the game today? The Chiefs or the Buccaneers? Fill up the chat. Let's get a little activity going. Give some input. Tell us who's going to win. And just for reference, No House Advantage Props, the sponsor of the show, they have Patrick Mahomes over under 326.5 yards, and they have Tom Brady over under 302.5. Are you opinionated on either of those numbers? Over under 326.5 for Mahomes? Over or under, which way would you lean?
I think I would lean on the over on that one. His numbers in the second half, the first half of the season for the Chiefs was good. They were playing well or whatever. And this is sort of the narrative that has some actual mathematical backing to it, is that the Chiefs just play better. They play more aggressive style football. As the season goes on, things get more important. In the second half, I think from week 9 onward, Mahomes averaged 338, which is just monstrous. And our projection for him is actually, I believe, slightly higher than that. So I guess I would take the over. It's not by an incredible amount, but it's by enough that I actually think it's worth betting, even with the juice, obviously.
Yeah, and then Tom Brady, the number 302.5, quite a bit higher than what we're seeing on the props at sportsbooks. I think that the number was, last I looked, 294.5 was kind of the consensus across books. I actually would have a slight lean towards the over on that. There's not a whole lot of things that I think are great values betting in this game, but Tom Brady, the over his passing yards, I think is one of the ones that would set up is that I think this game should be a shootout. So Tom Brady, 302.5 passing yards, with that number being what it is at No House Advantage, would you lean towards the over or under on that number?
Yeah, I think they have a better line. Like those 295, I saw 295 and 294, basically the two numbers I saw hung out there. Those I think are probably solid, slight leans towards the over. At that 302, I think it's close enough with like if you were to be betting this with juice, you would be not inclined to bet it. Although no house advantage, so that's the whole point. There's no house advantage, so I'd still take the over, and you're not as penalized for their line being what I think is just like mathematically more correct. It's closer to our projections, which I think are pretty dang good.
All right, and now let's get into the FanDuel and DraftKings contest a little bit, talking about the QB position to start. Obviously, only two guys to talk about. We only have one game on the entire slate. It's the showdown for the Super Bowl. So between Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, first I'm going to ask you the question of which do you think is the better DFS play? And I think we could kind of talk about them, FanDuel and DraftKings as a whole, just because they're two of the most expensive players. I don't think there's a whole lot that differentiates them between the two sites. And then how high of a priority do you make on making lineups with the quarterbacks? And do you think it's viable to make lineups without the quarterbacks?
Yeah, so I think in terms of which one do I think is better, it's probably Mahomes, even adjusting for his price. I mean, it's just like we talked about the props, which even though I think there's like maybe not, they're not perfect lines, they give us a good starting ballpark, and you can use our projections to adjust from there, or vice versa. Mahomes' line is pretty significantly ahead of Tom Brady. His team is projected to score a field goal more, which does factor into his ability to put up like touchdowns. So it does mean that Vegas expects the Chiefs offense to be better. Our projections confirm that. And throughout the course of the season, he was the like best or second best fantasy quarterback, whereas Brady was up there, but just not quite as high. So just from a median projection perspective, even adjusting for price, Mahomes to me would be the priority. And as long as we're talking like, the 10,000 entries, 28,000 entries or less, I don't feel the need to get that like crazy to fade really either of them. But for me, I guess if I have to choose one to fade, it's not going to be Mahomes. In terms of the largest field contest, like, the Millie Maker has 650,000 entries, especially on DraftKings. Quarterbacks aren't quite as much as a priority as they're on FanDuel. In that Millie Maker style contest, I think I probably still have, I think I am, I don't have many bullets. That the proxy for me is going to be the play action, which is basically the same. It's like 550,000 entries. I'm probably going to like, how do you possibly build lineups that can reasonably take down first place? By reasonably, I just mean they're not lineups of every player's $200 and you go, well, it's going to be not duplicated. They're lineups that have, a ceiling that can take down the tournament and not be duped 500 times, even 100 times is bad. Like, can you get to that 5 to 10 range? For me, I think one of them is just fading one of the quarterbacks, and it really depends on who you've played in the rest of your lineup. For me, I think I'm probably going to be going with, like, in the largest field tournaments, even though I like Chiefs to win, I think we're going to get a lot of Chiefs ownership. So I'd I am reluctantly probably fading some Mahomes in that, 550,000 entries. If the Bucs come out and upset them, you're going to want like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, or Antonio Brown plus Brady. It's a lot of salary right there. Then you probably just want one of the Chiefs trio. I think you can get different enough while not sacrificing, like not making a terrible lineup by going Bucs heavy and playing, a Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelsey. Pick a guy that isn't Patrick Mahomes because he's going to be so much more popular than them. So I'm not, it's not like the best feeling, but I do think in the large field contest, I'm only going to play one of them in a given lineup. I think you get a good ownership discount by playing Brady. So it really just depends on your contest size, I guess is the right answer. Small field contest, you don't have to get too crazy. I'm probably just playing both, honestly. Large field contest, I'm only playing one of them. I think you can totally get away by making plus EV lineups with Mahomes. I just think the difference between the two will not quite be reflected perfectly by ownership. I think ownership overall is just going to be so Chiefs heavy. Tampa Bay's a damn good team. They're only 3, the line is getting pushed towards them. It's not, it's not going to cross 0, but they can certainly come out and win this game. And I think the ownership is not quite going to reflect that. So tournaments, I guess my answer is Brady. Like big tournaments, big tournaments.
So here's where I have the difference of opinion, though, is that I kind of just have to lean back on what our projections say when I'm comparing them. And even though the price difference is significant, it's not so significant relative to the projection difference we have between them. So using the DraftKings projections as a baseline, we have Tom Brady project for 22 fantasy points about, and Patrick Mahomes for 29. That's a massive gap between the two. And I understand the DraftKings price, there's $2,000 price difference between the two. And then on FanDuel, there's a $1,500 price difference between the two. But given the gap in projections, I have to prioritize Mahomes as a stronger play. The other thing, too, is if you look at our top stacks tool, the Showdown tool, which gives everybody the optimal odds that we have projected for players to wind up in the optimal lineup, Patrick Mahomes is number one by a really wide margin.
Yeah.
And
it's a very wide margin.
And the other thing too is I feel like if we look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, right, great against the run, they were not so great against the pass this year. If you look at what happened when these teams played, I'm not saying that we should take away, a 1-game sample size and say this is what the case is going to be. If I remember correctly, that was the game. How many yards did Tyreek Hill finish with in that game?
Was that 267?
It was 269 yards on 13 catches. It was a big game for Travis Kelsey. And it's just, if you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense as a whole, great against the run, not as great against the pass. And if you look at what the Chiefs offense does more often than not, there's times they're going to run the ball, but if they can, they're going to throw the ball when they can. This is the Super Bowl. I think they want to put the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands. I would be stunned if they had a run-heavy game plan. So I'm going to lean towards Patrick Mahomes of the two quarterbacks. Both of them are fairly high priorities for me. Where I think it gets interesting, though, and we have a little bit of a difference of opinion on the quarterbacks here, but I think we both really like Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady as plays overall, is who do you think is higher upside, Tom Brady or the receivers of Travis Kelsey and Tyreek Hill? Because those, to me, I think Patrick Mahomes is pretty clearly the number one upside player in the contest. And then I think we kind of have a 1B grouping of Brady, Hill, and Kelsey. So of those guys, who do you think has the most upside? And going a little bit out of order here, but I kind of think that's it's important to talk when we're talking about lineup construction.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, these all have different positions, but in terms of how we're playing them, it doesn't matter what positions they play, in the sense of we don't have positions on Showdown or, MVP, any of that. So I think I'd probably have to lean slightly towards, maybe I have to just kind of back myself. It's going to be Kelsey and Hill for me. It's probably not even that close. It's still who I'd go with. We know that even though their median projections aren't going to probably be as high as someone like Brady, we literally talk about the upside of Tyreek Hill having one of the best fantasy games in the history of DFS. And it happened against this same team. I think it was week 12, maybe. So my only problem with playing these guys is I feel like even in the Millie Maker, you're going to have a ton of Chiefs 5-1 onslaughts. I think you're probably less likely to get that same roster with Bucs. But, it's always that weight of you have to give up so much projection by fading the Chiefs. The Chiefs just overall have the higher upside players. Mahomes, even at his price, projects better than Tom Brady. It's about how much projection are you willing to give up in order to get a unique lineup. For me, I'm willing to give up probably a lot, maybe even too much. But I will admit readily that Mahomes' number one ceiling wouldn't even have to make an argument for that. And then honestly, number 2 and 3 are probably his top pass catchers. So I think in anything that isn't the largest contest, I can actually pull up my CSV and tell you, anything that isn't these largest contests, I actually am just going a lot of Chiefs onslaught. It's just the fight to get unique becomes so different when you're facing off against 650 some odd thousand people.
Yeah. So how many ties do you think there's going to be for first on DraftKings? FanDuel is just inevitable. There's going to be ties. Yeah. It's so hard to avoid because the lineup construction doesn't offer nearly as many variables as the DraftKings does. I would be fairly surprised if there's a solo winner for the Millie. But if I was to set a line of, let's say, over under 69.5 ties for first place, you going over or under that number?
Over. Because I think ownership even looks accurate. I'm not there's some low owned plays that are going really that are really good plays or whatever. I think people generally recognize Ronald Jones is a good value. You want to play Chiefs. So I think if this game hits even somewhere within one standard deviation of a median outcome, high scoring game, Chiefs win, it's close. It's gonna be chalk city because I think ownership is roughly accurate. So I would take the over on that. Do you know how many dupes were in it was the Baltimore primetime game? I think it was when I forget. There was a Baltimore primetime game where the ultimate chalk roster hit, and it was just one of the most duped lineups you'd ever find. I wish I knew the exact number, but for this contest, over, because I think ownership is good and there's a lot of entries.
Is that the game where Lamar Jackson first came back from COVID and was kind of a little bit underpriced, and then he ran for a 70-yard touchdown in the second possession of the game? Is that
I think so. It was
about?
Yes. It was a Lamar obvious MVP spot that he hit. So it was probably that game.
I don't remember. I do remember that was a very heavily duped lineup. The other thing too is we'll have to talk about a little bit as we go through. And this is actually a good transition to the running back position because obviously Ronald Jones is a great value at running back, especially on DraftKings at 2,200. He's the obvious chalk cheap play on the slate. Beyond him, it's pretty hard to find good value plays because these teams are so top heavy concentrated, right? Like the Chiefs, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelsey, and Tyreek Hill. That's where so much of their production comes from. And then you look at the Bucs, it's more spread out, except all of the guys are relatively expensive other than Ronald Jones, right? Godwin's expensive. Evans is expensive. Obviously, Brady's expensive. Antonio Brown's expensive. And then there's just aren't that many targets available to the other people on the team. So the reason I bring that up is now we talk about the running back position and Ronald Jones at 2,200 on DraftKings. Is this chalk you're just willing to eat with the lack of value elsewhere, or are you going to try to differentiate yourself a little bit? And just full disclosure, I'm just going with Ronald Jones. He's going to be in almost all my lineups today. There's nobody else I like for cheap, and I'm just saying, so be it. If he scores 7 or 8 fantasy points, which isn't even that much, he's still fairly likely to end up on the optimal lineup. It's chalk I'm willing to eat, but are you willing to do something a little bit different?
Yeah, because the roster construction could favor the guys under 5,000 who, exactly as you said, they don't actually need to put up 20 points, because it could be that you just want to get as many studs and you're willing to take a 3 or a 4 because it got you that extra stud, because this is a game where, especially in the Chiefs side, but even to an extent the other side of the football, they're just pretty top heavy. Like, I want to play a lot of Evans and Godwin if I'm playing the Bucs side, and I want to play the obvious guys on the Chiefs. So it could be, like you said, where you don't actually need a ceiling game from Ronald Jones, because you just wanted to get the rest of the guys. It didn't matter how you got there. For me, Ronald Jones kind of just depends on my contest size. I'm not quite as confident in him as you are. In my lower field contest, I think it's probably worth it just to get to the optimal roster construction. But just another way that I think you can find different lineups is by playing less Ronald Jones in the large field entries, because I think it's kind of obvious that he is the only guy to pay down for. Like, assuming we have like a full complement of Sammy Watkins snaps, like, you don't want to be playing Demarcus Robinson. Like, Byron Pringle was like a 2 or 3 route per game guy. He has no value at that price range. Ronald Jones in his past 2 games has 23 carries and I think like 1 target. So that's actually like a ton of volume for a guy who's 2,200. I think for me, this kind of depends on your contest size. Although I do think for me in general, even in my low field contests, I'm probably using him as a way to get different, because I think if he does have a game where he scores 2 or 3, which is certainly in the range of outcomes, that's probably not enough. And I think that's very possible, especially because his team is a field goal or 3.5, depending on your book, underdog, and he has no pass catching equity, where Leonard Fournette is an incredible pass catcher. Now, that is accounted in Leonard Fournette's price. The floor, though, for Ronald Jones is incredibly low. Maybe he doesn't need a high, like I said, he doesn't need this ceiling outcome because he's so cheap, and the roster construction might favor it. I do think, though, if he goes out 2 points, I'm probably lapping the field who played this exact same roster construction.
So I'm not going 100% Ronald Jones. I'm pretty sure he's going to be my highest owned player on the slate. Will probably be Ronald Jones 1 and then Patrick Mahomes 2. In lineups that I don't have Ronald Jones, I'm going to try to prioritize Leonard Fournette, because I think that is the best way to at least find leverage and make a pivot there, because we have to consider what happens if Ronald Jones fails. I mean, we've seen him fail because he gets hurt warming up for a game. I'm not going to project that as the outcome in this game. But if he does fail, I think the most likely reason he does is because Leonard Fournette has a big game and just ends up taking most of the snaps on the field. If Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette are in a 50-50 timeshare, chances are Ronald Jones has a pretty good game relative to his salary. But if this is a game like we've seen some recently, where Leonard Fournette is just running well and he ends up getting 70% of the snaps and ends up playing a lot more than Ronald Jones does, that's the situation I see that's most like for Ronald Jones to fail. Maybe Leonard Fournette's on the field more. He ends up getting 4 or 5 targets. He ends up rushing for maybe 60, 70 yards and a touchdown or something like that. So I think that's the pivot play to make here. If you're not going with Ronald Jones, I would go with Leonard Fournette. I wouldn't necessarily force myself to just some other random value play, because I just don't think there aren't many of those guys that make sense. I'd rather go with more mid-range builds and try to get some exposure to Leonard Fournette in there. Does that make sense to you, or do you see it a little bit differently?
No, that's what I've done, because I'm not, like, you talked about the scenario where you're not on Ronald Jones, and you described exactly my build. It's not that I think I can pivot to Demarcus Robinson and get just as many points. The reason I'm not playing Ronald Jones is not because I think there are better plays in his range. I think it's possible that mid-range construction, as you said, like a Sammy Watkins or Leonard Fournette, even up to that Clyde Edwards-Helaire, one of those guys really pops, and you need to find a way to get him in. Maybe that means you save a captain, like you can't play Patrick Mahomes at MVP or whatever, captain, and you have to play a Tyreek or someone just to save that little bit of salary, because you needed to get Sammy Watkins in. You needed that jump from Ronald to Sammy. I don't think the pivot off Ronald is, as you said, playing just a far worse play in his price range. It's hoping that a different price range finds more success, and you can also leverage that in the other upper price ranges by playing Leonard Fournette. So you kind of laid out pretty much my exact roster construction, specifically because I'm not super onto Ronald Jones. I think it's exactly as you said. You're not trying to beat Ronald Jones at his price range. You're trying to beat the price range of Ronald Jones.
And then the other running backs from the Chiefs side, Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Darrell Williams, I can't prioritize either of them because if I'm spending up for a running back, I have to think that Fournette's a slightly stronger play than CEH. If I'm going cheap, I'd rather save the money and go to Ronald Jones over Darrell Williams because he's $3,000 cheaper. I find it really hard to trust these Chiefs guys for two reasons. Number one, I have no clue what the workload's going to be. Like Le'Veon Bell could randomly play snaps or something like that for all we know.
He could too.
Right? We just don't know. And I don't know what the workload's going to be. I think the priority is going to be to throw the ball for the Chiefs, especially because the Buccaneers have such a strong run defense and their pass defense is a little lacking. This game script to me sets up to be a game where the Chiefs are going to have to look to throw the ball. And it's not like we're saving that much money by going to Darrell Williams. And then, like I said, on the high end, I'd rather play Fournette to CEH. So let's start with there. If you could only roster one, and doesn't matter who else is in the lineup, just talking about projection, raw points, would you rather roster Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Leonard Fournette?
I'd probably take Leonard Fournette without thinking too deep into it. It's that he probably has a far superior grasp on his workload. Like our ability to project the split between Clyde and Darrell seems so minute, where I think we know what's going to happen probably with Leonard Fournette. He sees somewhere between 50 to 60 or 70% of the carries, but we know for sure he is getting every single target thrown to a running back on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And that's the certainty I'd be paying up for with Leonard Fournette. So without thinking about, how it correlates with my lineup ownership, Leonard Fournette easily the superior running back out of all four guys, just in terms of raw projection, not accounted for cost.
All right. So running backs, nobody else to really talk about because those are all of them. And I'm not going to force ourselves to talk about Le'Veon Bell. I think he's a pretty weak play. Maybe he gets snaps. Maybe he doesn't. I think he's more likely to not get snaps than he is to get snaps. Not somebody I'm interested in rostering. Are you on the same page with that?
Yeah, honestly, I'd rather roster Anthony Sherman. I think Sherman has just as much likelihood of playing like 5 snaps, 2 targets, and a red zone carry as Le'Veon Bell, and he's cheaper and probably will still be less owned. So I might end up getting one. I have a few entries into the million that play action. I think it's viable to play Anthony Sherman there. I think last season in the Super Bowl we had Kyle Juszczyk. This year we had Alec Ingold, and maybe in a game against the Chiefs. Obviously these are just the most outlier events, but the times you call an outlier event right in a field of 650,000 are going to be profitable. I'm not sure if I get that deep into the weeds yet, though. I'm tossing up if I want to have one Anthony Sherman bullet.
Yeah, I'm not going to. I did see at least one person in the chat was bringing up Anthony Sherman. I don't know where that comment went, but you were not the first person, surprisingly, to bring up Anthony Sherman on the show. But I'm not going to have him. I'm not going to have Le'Veon Bell. What I will have is some lineups on our sponsor site, No House Advantage. They're taking a different spin on daily fantasy sports by offering prop contests across the NBA, MLB, NFL, and PGA for cash prizes. And for NFL, they have a gigantic Super Bowl tournament. It's one of the biggest prize pools they've ever run. It's $10,000 to first place. And this exclusively peer-to-peer fantasy sports platform levels the playing field, makes it easier for you to win real cash prizes compared to traditional DFS sites. Those parties you could join for free today. Just download the No House Advantage app and sign up using the promo code Awesemo to get $25 in free play without depositing a dime. And then also all users will get a deposit match bonus of up to $100, which is only valid for today. And you also want to take advantage of our free No House Advantage projections for their $25K Super Bowl contest. Those projections are totally free on the site. So if you're interested, just go to awesemo.com, check out the projections, and you can see what's going on there. I think this is actually a good combination of things. Number one, we have a super chat from Blue Apples who's asking us for our opinion on Scotty Miller for today. And then also tie this into No House Advantage. One of the strongest prop projections we have for the No House Advantage contest is Scotty Miller over under 2.5 receptions. Our projections really like under 2.5 receptions for Scotty Miller. So I think this is going to go hand in hand with Blue Apple's question there. What do you make of Scotty Miller today? And do you think that he's a good play for DFS on the slate?
Yeah, I kind of agree with our projections, both in how I would bet it on No House Advantage and my exposure to Scotty Miller. I won't have zero Scotty Miller because it's hard to get to zero on anyone when there are so few options on a single showdown slate. But I'd have to imagine I come in lower in the field. It seems like the upside for him is almost that he never becomes the number 3 receiver, assuming AB just hobbles out there and cannot play at all. What happens? Well, they run more to tight end. Cam Brate gets out there and actually runs as essentially the number 3. He somehow also leapfrogs Gronk and runs as number 3 receiver. But then you've got Scotty Miller and Gronk fighting for those last 2 to 3 targets. I'm just not sure if it's really worth chasing what seems like a relatively low upside. I'd rather chase it with a Gronk or even a Brate, honestly, instead of what I think would be diving into like the fifth pass catcher, receiver, pass catcher, call whatever you want.
Yeah, and the other thing too is I think this prop came out. I could be wrong on this, but I think it came out long enough ago that AB's status was somewhat up in the air.
Probably
it wasn't necessarily that we knew for sure that he was playing or not playing. It was just there seemed to be some doubt whether he was going to play, and so with that in mind, the prop for Scotty Miller was set relatively high at 2.5. And I think that would be a really good projection had Antonio Brown been out there. Then you start to say like, oh, is Scotty Miller a good value play? What are we going to do with Scotty Miller for this slate? But it's the Super Bowl. There was time off. And now that Antonio Brown, all indications are that he's going to play. He's not going to have any kind of restrictions. Scotty Miller's not going to play a whole lot of snaps. And like you said, they have other guys that have gone to also. There's Brate, there's Gronkowski, there's Johnson. There's a whole lot of guys we've seen Brady throw the ball to. And he spreads the ball out a ton. It's really hard for me to see Scotty Miller getting 3+ receptions on this slate. So I'm going to say Scotty Miller, to Blue Apple's question, is a weak DFS play. And then for no house advantage, if you're playing there, under 2.5 receptions for Scotty Miller, that is definitely something that I would want to be looking at. So talking about the wide receivers here, and let's start with the Buccaneers, because we just brought up Scotty Miller, and we can talk about some of those other guys there also. We talked about the health of Antonio Brown. Looks like he should play. Probably not really a massive surprise. I think we all knew that Antonio Brown would end up suiting up. But still, it is hard to figure out who is going to be the guy for the Bucs on a game-to-game basis. We have Chris Godwin. We have Mike Evans. We have Antonio Brown. I'm going to start by saying this. Of the three of them, my preference is Antonio Brown for this slate. It's not that I'm super confident that he's going to be the number one option for Tom Brady. It's just price related. His salary at $6,200 on DraftKings to me is really favorable, especially because I'm trying to get some exposure to Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelsey alongside with getting exposure to the quarterbacks. And to me, I found that salary savings that comes with Antonio Brown at $6,200 is huge compared to the $8,400 and $8,800 for Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Do you see that any differently for me, or do you feel really strong that one of these receivers is going to be the guy for Brady today?
Yeah, I thought, interesting. I think Antonio Brown, maybe a little bit of a leverage off of Evans and Godwin. And then I realized the way you were building rosters, he's like the perfect play at that price, because it's exactly as you said. I think his projection, sure, it's probably not as good as Mike Evans. I won't dispute that. But at his price, the ability to fit in more Chiefs into your lineups and still play a good Bucs player who realistically could outscore his teammates, yeah, it kind of works perfectly to get someone like Antonio Brown in your lineup. So yeah, I ended up getting even I was sort of high when I was going to start building my first run of lineups on Antonio Brown. I just thought he was probably just a good leverage play off of his teammates. And then I saw the way he fit into the rosters I was trying to build, and I ended up getting even more of him than I thought. If I had to pick one of the other expensive guys, I do have a little bit of exposure to Mike Evans at captain. I just think people really this playoffs, and maybe it was the knee injury he came in, were favoring Chris Godwin with their ownership in both regular slates and the showdown slates, even though from week 9 to 16, which is when he was healthy, and they had Antonio Brown. So I think it's probably the truest representation of what, if everyone is healthy in this game, we can expect. He was dominating, and pull it up. He was, 22% target share and 29% air yard share. Neither Godwin nor Brown were above 20% in either of those. And I know we did have one game that Godwin missed in there, but at least in terms of these are per game rates. So it wasn't like we had Godwin running as the 1B. It was more like they had a 2A and a 2B between Godwin and Brown, and then Mike Evans up top pretty much alone. So if I had to rank them, including price, probably be a slight edge towards Brown and then Evans. And for me, Godwin's a player that I think, for me, his role just doesn't seem to align with his price and ownership typically when I'm making my builds.
So here's another question, because I think it's important when we talk about the wide receivers. What kind of game script are you expecting here? I know that most everybody, it seems the Chiefs are the more popular pick to win, but like we've said also, it's a 3-point game. Much to Jordan's chagrin, there's no way to look at this game and confidently say that one team is a lock to win or way more likely to win than the other. I see Jordan shaking his head behind in our Zoom chat as I said that there's not one team that's a lock to win. I think, though, I'm more so than picking a team outright to win. I'm pretty confident in saying that the game is going to be very high scoring. Right, we have a 56-point total for this game. I think that the Chiefs, like I said, are going to be looking to throw the ball. The script sets up much better for them to be looking to air it out with Mahomes than is to run it against the Buccaneers pass defense being much weaker than the run defense. And then look at the Bucs side. If we assume that the Chiefs are going to air the ball out and score, the Chiefs themselves are probably going to have to throw the ball a decent amount to try to keep up. So I do think that you want to have probably at least one of these Buccaneers receivers in most lineups, whether it be Godwin, Evans, or Antonio Brown. I said for me, my priority play is going to be Antonio Brown because of the price. But I think that there's a pretty good likelihood that at least one of these guys ends up in the optimal lineup. Do you feel the same way, or are you okay building lineups that don't have any of these three Buccaneers receivers just because the targets are so uncertain?
Yeah, I would lump in probably Gronk. I'm not sure so much about Brait. I know he's been hot. I think 16 targets in 3 playoff games, but I do think a lot of that is Brown has yet to, in a playoff game, at least this year, obviously, play in over half of his team's offensive snaps. Like, they're going to get a lot of Brait in that scenario. If he actually does grit it out and play a full-time role in this game, I think Brait returns to what we saw in the regular season, which is like definitely not worth it at his now elevated price. And it's like, just like we talked about with the early week props, like DraftKings sets their prices 2 weeks in advance. You can only do so much in assuming that Brown does or does not play. So I'm just, because they had to price him early, not going to be a ton on Brait. But if you lump in Gronk with the pass catchers, basically all of my Kansas City 4-2 and 5-1 onslaughts are going to feature just a single run back of an individual pass catcher. And because of pricing, it ended up being a lot of Brown, but I also got a decent amount of Gronk, which I was mostly fine with because he was like a pretty solid play during almost the entirety of the regular season. It was like the week 1 and 2, they sort of did the thing they were doing now where Brait, or in that case, I believe it was OJ Howard, ran as the pass catcher and they used Gronk as a blocker. But after that, his routes went up as far as tight ends go. He had a high ADOT and he was number 2 on the team in red zone targets. So if only 1 or 2 of the pass catchers get there, I think it's at least reasonable that it could be Gronk over any of the other guys, especially at his price. So the same way that we're talking about AB having like good upside, good role, and price fits better with Chiefs lineups, I think Gronk is even that to another level because his price is so much less. So I probably, if you want to lump them all together, have like another sort of similar to Antonio Brown level of priority on Gronk. It's probably not so much I'm playing like 1 running back plus 5 Chiefs, because I agree. I just don't see the game playing that way. In neutral game scripts, these were the number 1 and number 2 pass heaviest teams based on our advanced stats. As long as this game is modestly close, both teams hardly care about running the football. I'm going to take their entire season and playoff data at their word and say they're not going to start running the football all of a sudden. So in most of my lineups, my priority on a single run back is almost always going to be a pass catcher.
Yeah, I'm going to address something in the YouTube chat where people are saying, no, the game's going to go to the under. Yeah, it could. It could. I think the 56 is a fair line. But with that said, if the game scores 52 or 53 total points, it goes under and it's still a high-scoring game where there's a lot of scoring and probably a handful of touchdowns. So I think that even if you do think the game goes to the under, it has to go way under for it to be a low-scoring game. So I don't really think that is going to be the case. There's a little bit more clarity in the Chiefs wide receiver core than the Buccaneers wide receiver core. That's not saying a whole much because the Buccaneers maybe have the murkiest wide receiver core of any team in the league. They've been so hard to figure out because, number 1, there's a lot of talent. And then number 2, Tom Brady, just in general throughout his career, has always been a guy who spreads the ball around. With the Chiefs wide receivers, let's start with Tyreek Hill. I think he's pretty likely to have a big game. And the question becomes then, do you prefer Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelsey? For me, I prefer Travis Kelsey. I think he's a higher priority play. We have him projected for about 2 more fantasy points. So of the 2 of them, I lean towards Hill as the better play. How do you feel about these 2 guys? And do you think that these are guys that we absolutely have to have one of in the lineups? Or if both the quarterbacks go off, we maybe don't see them in the optimal lineup together?
I don't think I'll end up having a lineup that doesn't have at least one of these guys just based on like the upside that they possess. Even like their upsides are very, very parallel to someone like their 90th percentile outcome, 95th percentile outcome probably actually looks something like, a Patrick Mahomes does. It's just in the median as you come closer to the average projection. Patrick Mahomes does project like raw points per dollar and overall points better than them, but I'm pretty much going to have almost all of these guys. And I think because if I'm playing like, my Bucs heavy lineups, in those scenarios, I'm assuming that the Bucs go out and probably significantly outscore the Chiefs. And when your team isn't scoring as much, like that is going to disproportionately affect the quarterback who needs like touchdowns, especially to get there. Like you can have a Travis Kelsey rack up a single touchdown, but get 10, like what do you have, like 13 catches versus, was it the Bills, whatever. Like these guys, because of the nature of the way that just fantasy DFS scores, is that the pass catchers can go off independently of their offense, not playing well. So in my Bucs heavy lineups, I'm typically not running it back with like a 5-1 with solo Mahomes. I'm probably not doing that. And in my Chiefs heavy lineups, like, yeah, of course I'm just going to get to some of them. So If I'm fading anyone on the Chiefs in an individual lineup, it probably ends up being Mahomes just because I played a lot of Bucs in that lineup. Between the two, I really have no strong preference. I'm a little surprised our ownership on them at the captain spot is not it's almost insignificant, the difference between them, Travis Kelsey and Tyreek Hill. I don't think Tyreek Hill has led the trio in scoring since, I believe it was that game against the Bucs, since week 12. My lean would be that level of recency bias implies that we're not going to have crazy high ownership on him relative to Kelsey. But our ownership projections, and I can only go so far in trying to guess where our ownership projections are going to be off. Like if I was actually able just to predict where they would be wrong, I'd probably get paid a lot to make good ownership projections. And FYI, I don't get paid. No one pays me to make ownership projections. So if they're correct, I would guess I'll take Travis Kelsey. Like he has been the better fantasy player since that week 12 game, essentially. Higher floor and a very similar ceiling. So recent data says that Travis Kelsey is as good, if not better. The price isn't that much different, and the ownership is almost nothing. So I guess at this point, I do probably have to say Travis Kelsey. I wanted to be really contrary and be like, let's get a 9-8% Tyreek Hill. Our ownership projection seems like the field recognizes that they're about equal.
Yeah, and that's also the reason I lean a little bit towards Travis Kelsey is just because we haven't projected higher. So all else is the same, right? There is no ownership play. The price is about the same. So I consider all that, and I just lean towards we have a higher projection for Kelsey. Therefore, I think he is the better play. Guys, we have nearly 1,000 people watching. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget, hit the like button, because if you do, we get really excited. People don't realize that the way that Kyle's hair grows, every time that somebody hits the like button, his hair gets a little bit longer. That's the science of it. That's how it works. You hit the like button, Kyle's hair grows a little bit longer. By the time the show ends, if we get enough likes, I mean, he could have hair down to the floor, and I mean, who wouldn't want to see that? That would be the biggest excitement on the YouTube channel since I revealed my pink chair. Right. And I know that some people were disappointed by that, but you're not going to be disappointed by Kyle's hair. So all the more reason to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Talking about some of the other wide receivers we have to roster from the Chiefs. To me, Mecole Hardman, pretty easy player to stay away from. Sammy Watkins back and healthy now. I know that Hardman is somebody that like to use as kind of a gadget player a lot, but $5,600 on DraftKings, that's a pretty steep price to pay for Mecole Hardman. And then also on FanDuel at $7,500, I think there's better sources of saving salary. So Hardman, somebody you're willing to get to, or are you like me, leaving him out of your player pool?
Oh, you're leaving him out of your player pool. I don't think I left him out of my player pool, but I got so much more Sammy Watkins over him. It's exactly as you said and I talked about earlier. It was like weeks 1 through 5, and then like somewhere in the ballpark of like 6 through 12 or 15, when Sammy Watkins was healthy, essentially, he was running a route on 75% of Patrick Mahomes' dropbacks. And Mecole Hardman was not even out route running Demarcus Robinson. He was not even the number 3 receiver. He was like the 3B at his elevated price. It's sort of the same thing with Cameron Brate, where if Sammy Watkins were to be out, yeah, I'd actually have some interest, but we assume Sammy Watkins is not only in, but probably pretty close to 100% healthy, at least something like that. He clearly runs as their unquestioned number 2 receiver. Doesn't always translate into a ton of production. That's kind of Sammy Watkins' thing, is doing a little with a lot, but he was averaging 5.5 targets per game, like 35 routes per game when he was healthy in the regular season. And he's less salary than Mecole Hardman. And he's going to be about the same ownership. Right now, I think I'm 3% more owned. I'm just going to take the layup and go Sammy Watkins, as it has always been. Just a Sammy Watkins layup. He goes out and catches one pass for 10 yards and throws an interception.
You know when Sammy Watkins does more than that, though? Week 1, because week 1 Sammy Watkins is one of the best players in the NFL. So how about this? Maybe a little bit of time off, right? Maybe Sammy Watkins he reset a little bit. He missed some games, towards the end of the season.
This is his personal week 1.
It's week 1 again, right? This is his time to shine. So, but Sammy Watkins, just based on the price point, and there's a lack of cheap options in this game, right?
Yeah.
We've talked about Ronald Jones. He's going to be massively popular, but for good reason. If you're not rostering Ronald Jones, what other value guys are going to look at? And Sammy Watkins, to me, is one of the guys that makes sense on DraftKings at 4,200. If we go down to some of the other cheaper wide receivers, we have Byron Pringle and Demarcus Robinson. I have some interest in Demarcus Robinson, but not really a ton. I definitely like him more than Byron Pringle, at least. But it's like I said, it's just hard to find other cheap options. That's something that's getting me on Sammy Watkins. What's my confidence level in Sammy Watkins? None. I've rostered Sammy Watkins before. I know what the deal is. Yep. Sometimes he's kind of good. Sometimes he's kind of shit. So it's a mixed bag with him, and it's probably going to be the worst outcome, because that's what we see from more often than not. But there's also upside there. So if we're being realistic about his range of outcomes, there is a chance for ceiling there. So Sammy Watkins, somebody I think is worth getting some exposure to. How do you feel about Byron Pringle and Demarcus Robinson? I highly doubt Pringle plays a ton, so I confidently am not going to have exposure to him. Demarcus Robinson, I am getting to a little bit. How about for you?
Yeah, I got to some Demarcus Robinson, probably an uncomfortable amount because it makes rosters work if you're not playing, like he's the non-Ronald Jones. I still like getting to a different build overall than just saying like, what if he outscores Ronald Jones? Because Ronald Jones is a better play, no doubt about that. So I got to some of him, but I did try and limit my exposure so I wouldn't just be trying to make a 1v1 bet of him versus Jones. He did, he was number 3 on the team in wide receiver routes, excluding Travis Kelsey, whenever Sammy Watkins was healthy, running ahead of Mecole Hardman. And unlike Mecole Hardman, who at his price, like you actually probably need a touchdown, or I guess if he gets the 100-yard bonus or has a long run, but you need those outcomes. Whereas like the same argument, you can make for Ronald Jones, a 6-point game, that can actually work out in your favor, even though it doesn't sound like a great game. Probably has a better chance of doing it than Demarcus Robinson does, but I still have some Robinson exposure, and I think he's like a good leverage point off of Hardman, who looks like they'll be roughly in the same ballpark of ownership, but Demarcus Robinson was running more routes. His salary is cheaper. I don't think they're that different of players. One of them is cheap and only a little bit more popular. So I have some Demarcus Robinson, not a ton though, mostly as a proxy of me really getting into the Sammy Watkins stuff.
Yeah, and then also as we talk about some of the tight ends here, because somebody was saying in the chat, asking us, do we know that Cameron Brate has a back injury? And yes, Cameron Brate has a back injury. However, he's going to play. And according to Cameron Brate, just so I'll bring up the quote here so that it's accurate, he said that this isn't really all that interesting of a quote, but he says he feels much better today now. So he's trending up. He seems to be healthy. Don't forget also with the Super Bowl, there's a week off in between the conference championship game and the Super Bowl. So we have to assume at this point that everybody's at least relatively healthy. Nobody's going to be up.
All hell.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like Rob Gronkowski. Do you guys see what he looked like after he retired? He weighed like 160 pounds. He retired. He immediately lost weight. He comes back. It's like, oh, Gronk's big again. Is that natural? Maybe. But either way, look, they've got some time to get some needles injected into him in this extra week off here. And the other thing also with Cameron Brate and him potentially not being 100%. This is the final week of a really long football season. Nobody is really 100% at this time of the year. Everybody's at least somewhat banged up. Somebody has a shoulder injury. Somebody has a knee injury. That's kind of how it goes for everybody. So as long as they're playing, I'm going to assume that they're basically full go. I'm not dinging Cameron Brate because of the potential back injury. If I'm dinging Cameron Brate for anything, it's because he's 4,800 on DraftKings and just isn't a very high priority play for me. But I expect Cameron Brate to be out there. If I'm rostering a tight end from the Buccaneers, it's going to be Rob Gronkowski. And I'll ask you this now, because I know you brought up Gronk before. How much are you actually getting to Gronk? Is he a high priority play for you? Are you looking to be about the field with him, under the field? Where do you stand with him as a play?
Yeah, he wasn't like a high priority, like as I got to get me more Gronk. He definitely hasn't been really good in the playoffs. He has like 7 targets. 5 of them came, I believe, 2 games ago. But I do think their rotation of just overall skill position players looks much more like it did when they had like Antonio Brown weeks 9 through 16, where they don't run as much 2 tight end. They prioritize that 3-1 and 1 running back. And that was pretty good for Gronk. I think it was probably also in the game versus the Chiefs where he went over 100 yards because, like I said earlier, as far as tight ends go, his ADOT is actually pretty considerably high, and it even got higher with Antonio Brown on the roster. So I wasn't prioritizing him as like he's this smash play. But then when you realize if you're building Chiefs-heavy lineups, just getting a pass catcher from the Buccaneers who is not, who's not a expensive guy and is also not a bad price. Like Cameron Brate is cheapish, but like I don't think he's that good of a play. I don't think he'll have a great role. Whereas Gronk, I actually do have projected for a pretty considerable role at a very low price. So I end up being like way over the field on Gronk, very uncomfortably over the field on like him and Sammy Watkins, which is like just this terrible feeling tandem of players to be over the field on. But had to make some sacrifices to get the good plays in somewhere, and it ended up being Gronk and Sammy.
Is there any narrative that plays into here? I know it's something we don't talk about a whole ton, but still there is a level of comfortability between Rob Gronkowski and Tom Brady. They've played in these games together. How many times have they played big games together? Now it's like their 30th, like significantly big career altering type game that they've played together. Is there any point where if this is a close game, Tom Brady has to throw to one of his guys that he has the most comfort level in? Is that any reason to think that we'd say that maybe Rob Gronkowski gets 1 or 2 targets than usual? And I ask this because we only have one game to talk about. I'm trying to stretch for time a little bit, but is there any logic to that where we could see maybe Gronkowski gets a slightly larger role than he would have in, say, like just a random week 7 of the regular season?
I would have said like it's possible. You can't really predict these things. But also, if that were the case, we probably would have gotten more than one Gronk target, I believe, last week, and one Gronk target in the Washington game, I believe. So I guess probably not. But also, because I'm playing a lot of Gronk, I'm just going to blindly believe that anyways. Like the big confirmation of my priors, you're telling me there's a potential narrative around a player I have a lot of. Let's go. The chemistry is hopefully as real as it ever gets with these two guys.
And here's how I feel a lot of narratives work anyway. We find a guy that we like for whatever reason. It could be good reasons we like them, and then we plug the narrative in anyway afterwards, just to be like, and I like him for this reason also.
I'm going to be doing that, yes.
I just kind of threw that out there. I don't really think that's going to be the case. It doesn't really change the amount of Gronkowski I'm getting to. I am overweight to the field on him in my initial builds. I didn't really get to Cameron Brate. Obviously, of any tight end, and not that the tight end position matters all that much because everybody's just kind of a flex today. So it's not like the traditional tight end slate where it's like, oh my God, I have to pick one of these tight ends, and then Travis Kelsey would be the obvious choice. But we don't have to roster a tight end on this particular slate. Kickers, because they're on the slate and we kind of have to talk about them. People were asking about them earlier. I actually think Harrison Butker makes for a pretty strong play on this slate, and I know that later whenever we see Alex talking or tweeting about the games, he's going to bring up the kickers today because he's somebody who rosters kickers fairly heavily in showdown and single game slates. The reason being is because they typically make for pretty good value plays, especially on a game like this. It's going to be high scoring. It's hard to find value as is. I mean, if we're trying to talk ourselves into players like Sammy Watkins and Demarcus Robinson, at least the average outcome for the kickers is much higher than those guys. Obviously, the upside for Sammy Watkins is higher because if he catches a touchdown, has 4 catches for 40 yards and touchdown, there's no way a kicker matches that. But at least on like 3 out of 5 slates or something, the kickers are going to outscore him just because it's very hard for a kicker to score no points. Whereas Sammy Watkins, it's not that hard for Sammy Watkins to score 0 points. I've seen him do it all the time. So how do you feel about the kickers, Harrison Butker, Ryan Suckup? Do you have a lean between the two, or do you not like either of them?
No, I actually like both kickers a lot for the exact reasons you said. Like just in the median, they look like very good value plays, and this is a slate where we need value. And like I already said, I'm trying to maybe push off that Ronald Jones. I think that'll be the obvious value. So for me, it's basically moving up into that next tier of like 3,000 and above. That's the reason I'm on a lot of Gronk and a lot of Sammy. It's also the reason where I have a lot of both kickers. I think Harrison Butker is the better like just raw play, but I do think there's probably some element of every field goal Harrison Butker kicks is a touchdown. Tyreek Hill, for instance, didn't score. So I think maybe there's some leverage into getting your value of the opposite kicker of the, if you're playing Tyreek Hill captain, go with Ryan Suckup, vice versa. But I still think it's okay to play the kicker of, your captain, your quarterback in the same lineup. I have more exposure to the opposite pairing, opposite kicker as captain, but I have both because I think they look like good values. And it's exactly as you said, like, would I be shocked if Ronald Jones goes out and rushes 10 times for 22 yards and a fumble? Sammy Watkins does not catch a pass. Mecole Hardman screws up on his one gadget play, and it's just the studs play well, and then you just needed to find whatever points you could below 5,000. No, it would not be surprising if like low probability plays collectively don't hit. That would mean like a kicker or even maybe a defense, as we'll get into, would enter the optimal lineup. You probably need 2 guys in the, we'll just call it sub 5,000 range to have touchdowns, 100-yard bonuses, big games for them to make the optimal lineup. There are worlds where no 2 guys below 5,000 have good games. There's just one of them. Gronk has a multi-touchdown game, and that's really it. In that case, a kicker probably makes the optimal lineup just as a way to get some cheap points because there were no other cheap points. So I think people don't generally build around that. They see the upside of a Sammy, of a Mecole, even like, Ronald Jones and these guys, and they think, well, at the high end, they're going to outscore them. So I don't want to play these low ceiling options. But the lower ownership you get on the low ceiling options, their low ceiling becomes less of a hindrance if the game just plays out to where you didn't need a ceiling outcome. So because they fit with my roster construction, I think their median projection isn't quite accounted for in their ownership. I'm above the field on both kickers. I got more Butker because his projection was better.
All right, we have a super chat here from D Owens 89. He asks, "Who is our favorite contrarian captain?" Actually, I think this is a good talking point. He says Miller, Brink, Gronk.
Great, that's gotta be
is that a? It's got. Oh, it could. I guess
it could be Brink or
Gronk. Wait, we could. He combine them too. Is there a way you could get? Is there some salary option where it's like if you pay 6 Savs and you get the production of Brate and Gronk together? So we'll address those separately. We'll say Brate and Gronk as separate plays, or Demarcus Robinson. So reading off those 4 names: Miller, Brate, Gronk, Robinson. Who is your favorite contrarian option? I'm going to say for me, and this is for captain also, I'm going to go with Demarcus Robinson. Number one, he's the cheapest of all those options. The other thing too is he has Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback, and I know that I'm obviously that Tom Brady also has about the equal chance to have a big game today, but I lean a little bit more towards Patrick Mahomes. The other thing too is that Mahomes doesn't spread the ball around nearly as much as Tom Brady does. Like, I just have no clue what to make of any of these Buccaneers wide receivers in terms of where the targets are going to go to. So guys like Miller, I don't really like all that much. Cameron Brate, I don't really like all that much. Gronk is the one of those guys that I do have some exposure to. But Demarcus Robinson, for the salary savings, and then we've seen him have pretty big games at times this year. Like, we've seen him score touchdowns. We've seen him get targeted in the red zone. So I think that, to me, he would be the guy there. And then if you roster Demarcus Robinson to captain, number one, if he happens to score a touchdown, that could break the slate. But then number two, you open up so many options in terms of salary where there's so many studs in this game. You could kind of play whoever you want at that point after you roster Demarcus Robinson at captain.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say because the distribution on the Bucs is probably more random, that would favor the guys who are like the cheap guys. Like, what if for whatever reason, like we've had this experience with Brate 3 weeks in a row, where like, oh, Tom Brady doesn't seem to have, like, maybe it's just the talent distribution is that, you know, the third or fourth receiver on the Chiefs is so much worse than Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelsey, or Gronk, if he's still pretty good, is actually like competitive with, you know, Mike Evans, that he can pull targets off of those guys. So because of that, I'd be a little more interested in moving down, but probably the farthest down I would move would be Gronk. I don't think I'd get too far into Brate or Scotty Miller. I think for me, the randomness of the distributions mostly favors a random good Antonio Brown or Gronk game. I don't know if it gets to the depths of someone like Brate, as long as he's not getting the playoff volume he's seen so far, and the same with Scotty Miller. So I would rank them Rob Gronkowski number one, because I think he probably has maybe not as much 100-yard equity as Demarcus Robinson, but at least he has some. I know he does have at least a 100-yard game this season because he has a higher ADOT. It's probably a little easier for him to have like a volatility spike. And he definitely has probably the most touchdown equity of any of these guys. But then DeMarcus was my number two. And the price also does make it even easier to get to him, just because it's, like you said, it opens up all these options. And when Sammy Watkins was healthy, he was the number three receiver. And being the number three receiver for Patrick Mahomes is probably a pretty good thing.
All right. So the defenses here, I don't really have a whole lot to say here. Buccaneers 2,800, Chiefs 2,600. I'm pretty surprised that the Chiefs defense is actually cheaper than the Buccaneers defense on DraftKings. Yeah. Obviously, nothing to talk about in terms of FanDuel because they don't have defenses on their single game slates. I mean, if I have to roster one, and by the way, the ownership is projected the same for them too. We have both of them projected at 10%. I think this is just a situation where the reason they have any ownership is because of price, and we're hurting for salary saves in this game. So some people are just clicking on the defenses. If I have to roster one of them, it's easily the Chiefs defense for me. Tom Brady's been way more mistake prone this year than Patrick Mahomes. It doesn't mean that I expect him to have a bad game, but if you look at Mahomes over the course of the season, how often is he having blow-up games where he just doesn't play well and the other defense tees off on him? It never happens to Patrick Mahomes. It doesn't happen frequently to Tom Brady, but it's happened a few times this year. Most notably, there was that Saints game where they just absolutely got housed earlier in the year. There have been times where Tom Brady looks his age and hasn't played particularly well. Once again, I don't think that is what's going to happen, but I think it's more likely to happen to Tom Brady than it is to happen to Patrick Mahomes. So for that reason, I think the Chiefs are a slightly more favorable play, but I don't really have much interest in either of the defenses. For you, do you have any strong defense takes? Because who doesn't want a defense take for the Super Bowl, right? Defense wins championships, according to one guy in the chat who appears to be a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan.
How could we have known that the guy who thinks defenses are really crucially important thinks the better defense? You know, that's his team. How could we have possibly known? No, I'll take the Chiefs. Like, especially because they're going to be owned the same. Like you said, like the pricing it's good enough to where you actually might consider getting down there, and it's $200 cheaper for the Chiefs. Which, yeah, I agree with you. That's just kind of, I don't know, feels weird to me. Whatever, I'm going to take that, especially when, like, if it was 15 to 9%, where everyone recognized that the Chiefs being the favorites and having the cheaper defense was kind of an incongruency. If everyone recognized that and you got an ownership discount by going to the Bucs, maybe I'd have a little interest in them, but you don't get, there's no ownership differential. The price is in favor of the team who actually should have the more expensive defense. Yeah, I'm just going to take the Chiefs. I'm not going to have a ton of them. I think the kickers are probably better to get to. They're a little more expensive. I think it's worth it just because it's really that neither of these teams are prone to often making egregious mistakes. Patrick Mahomes literally never does. It's incredible that he can be so aggressive and talented and also not do the Russell Wilson thing where you take a lot of sacks, or I guess, the Jameis Winston thing where you just hold the ball and make big plays and also throw like too many interceptions. He doesn't do any of it, which is just incredible. Tom Brady this year, like you said, actually has, I believe, twice as many interceptions, like 6 to 12. He has a little bit more of a propensity. It's not like he's prone to do this, but if there was one, it would be Tom Brady, who would be more likely to just have a off game. Neither quarterback really takes a ton of sacks, don't throw a ton of interceptions, so not a ton of interest, but I'll take the favored, the 3-point favorite, cheaper defense with no ownership if you're just going to give me no ownership differential.
All right. And guys, I'm about to do a quick ad read here, but something that you guys, I want you to do, throw out some Super Bowl hot takes. And then after I do the ad read, I'll check out the YouTube chat and I'll read out some hot takes. So the most egregious hot take, but something you actually think is going to happen. Not like Rob Gronkowski has 300 receiving yards. Give me a somewhat reasonable hot take and I'll read some of them off. But also don't forget that you can get access to all of our great Awesemo Plus tools and content for nearly every DFS sport out there with an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. This includes access to the premium content tools on Awesemo.com, including player projections, ownership projections, a premium Slack channel, and much more. If you're only looking to play NFL, then you can sign up for our NFL Express weekly pass for only $3.95, which includes access to all of our projections and tools for showdown and single game contests, which of course includes everything that involves the Super Bowl. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Also, guys, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Awesemo_com and at Awesemo NFL. So let's go to the YouTube chat here. Let's read off some of these here and see what some people are coming up with.
Oh no.
Travis Kelsey, 3 touchdowns. I don't think that's crazy. I don't think it's likely, but that wouldn't necessarily shock me. They're coming in. There's a lot of hot takes in here. So
Bell has 10 plus points off of 2 plays. It's feasible. It's not even impossible that for whatever reason, Bell gets 8 snaps and 2 of them come in the red zone and he scores. It's the same reason I said you can play Anthony Sherman, but God, that would be incredibly tilting to see Le'Veon Bell go out and score any amount of points above 2.
We've got a halftime show hot take. The weekend opens up with Starboy. I assume that there's stuff you could bet on that somewhere. I'm
Is that
sure
a hot
that
take?
There are.
That can't be a hot take. That's that'd be the one you would, unless maybe you close with one of the most popular songs, but that feels like it can't be that much of a hot take. That's got to be one of the 3 favorites.
Jason Pierre-Paul winning MVP. By the way, I thought he should have won when the Giants beat the Giants beat the Patriots the first time. I thought that Jason Pierre-Paul was rightful MVP in that game. By the way, to my knowledge, nobody with 6.5 fingers has ever won, or 7.5 fingers has ever won the Super Bowl MVP. So that would be a new record. That would put that in the NFL Hall of Fame. There
are some Super Bowl 5. If you told me the MVP of Super Bowl 5 had 1 eye, 8 toes, and a hand, just one, I'd be like, yeah, it was. What would that have been, the 60s or something? I could buy it.
There was that kicker who had the
boot,
he just had he just had the boot where he had half a foot, so he just had a steel plate in his foot and just had a hammer that he was swinging. That should have been illegal. It's like the Blade Runner when he was cheating in the Olympics and he killed his girlfriend. That guy was no good. I didn't agree with him at all. Let's see. Low scoring game, 13-10. I would be totally shocked if that happens.
That's was Rams Patriots though, right? Was a really low scoring game, and I believe that one also had an incredibly high total because the Patriots were the Patriots, obviously, and then the Rams were on an incredible tear that season, and it was a miserably low scoring game. You had some I don't know if it was a solo ship, but you had the Julian Edelman, no Brady captain lineup that won. I mean, again, that seemed like it was 3+ standard deviations away from the mean projection. I don't think that happens in this game, but I guess it's possible.
I like in here somebody says 200 receiving yards and 10 receptions for Tyreek Hill. That would be a really lofty game. I can't even say it's impossible because it would be well short of his production when they played each other in the regular season. And then I'll read off one more, and then we are going to have to sign off because we have to turn the show over to the next guys. Fireworks are dangerous. I agree. I've had a couple firework incidents myself. I lit on fire once. You don't want to play with those things. That's why Jason Pierre-Paul is trying to set the record for least amount of fingers ever won by a Super Bowl MVP. You know what? Here's the good one I like. Kansas City Chiefs, a backup tight end scores a touchdown. If you're looking to just play some really ridiculous, just one-off plays in a showdown, it does seem like for whatever reason we see coaches drop crazy plays in Super Bowls that we don't normally see. So maybe that is something we could have happened. I don't mind that hot take. I think we could sign off on that. Guys, thank you very much. And stick around because we have 2 more hours of Super Bowl content coming up, breaking down everything there is to do with the Super Bowl. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Awesemo_com, at Awesemo NFL. Also, like the YouTube channel, subscribe to the video as well. Guys, thank you very much. Me and Kyle are off for the day. We're going to go watch some football now. Jordan, play the music, and thank you guys for watching.
I was expecting Kyle's hair to be down to the floor.
Yeah.
It's just pulled up, so the bun has been getting like quietly larger.
Later, guys.
See you guys. Good luck.
Justine came across one of the shows on Facebook the other day. She's like, who's the one with the man bun? It's a hell of a sweater, Jordan. Pullover, but thanks for noticing. Or no, it's a cardigan, but thanks for noticing, right, Ben?
And yeah, no, but thanks for asking. Yeah. Is it still snowing there?
We're done. We got another 6 inches today. We still have it was like 25 inches on the ground, right?
Yeah. We're almost done. It's starting to stop.
Brutal. Supposed to get another 10 to 14 on Thursday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I'm moving the Texas.
Teleported right there.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com Deeper Dive, last edition of the year. It's Super Bowl 55, presented by No House Advantage. Well, the Super Bowl isn't, but this show certainly is. I'm Dave Loughran on Twitter at Laffy_D, LOUGHY_D. And joining me for the last time, what's this, week 20? Week 21? One of those. Week 21, I think it is. Alex Baker, Awesemo himself, #1 ranked DFS player at Awesemo DFS, and Ben Rasa. One might call him a jack of all trades, master of some, at JazzRaz DFS, Z DFS. Ben, it's the Super Bowl. It's Christmas for adults. What's going on, brother?
Yeah, it's finally here. Feels like we've been waiting on this because, we had no football last week. I'm excited to get it done. More snow on the ground for you and me. We are snowed in here, but I'm excited. It's everything you could ask for in a game. I have no rooting interest, but 2 great teams. I think it's pretty fair. A lot of scenarios to break down, so I'm excited to get into it.
The pessimist in you would have said months ago that this would never happen, that we would not be talking about the Super Bowl in early February.
That's true. And I wish they canceled it considering Brady got in again. So it didn't work out as it usually doesn't. But
you're not going to like where I stand on Tampa today. I can assure you of that. Alex, what's going on, man?
What's up? Excited for another Super Bowl here. This is the day we got to make super degen bets, and it's the norm. So I'm taking full advantage of that.
Yeah, Jordan, can we fix Alex? It looks like he's sitting in my office right now. It's just a head. No body, just a head.
That's weird. I try to have this special background for the Super Bowl, but
I see that.
Yeah, John says, "Oh my God, Alex is in my living room." No, I don't. It's not the background. You can throw the background back up. That's fine. It's just, I think that the cropping where there's just a head and nothing behind it or nothing around it. But Anyway, Manny, I don't have to sell you this hat. You can go buy one of these. They're in our store. Go buy it. It's awesome, man. Plus, it's got that green under the brim. Just pretty sick. Anyway, we're happy to have all of you guys with us. Hammer that thumbs up button if you're just jumping in, and subscribe to the channel. It's the last one of the year for the football season. Show a little love here if you like what we've done all season long, and maybe it'll bring you some good luck along the way. So hit that thumbs up. Spam that thumbs up. It's greatly appreciated. Let's jump into it, boys. We got an hour here, and as you guys can see on the left side of the screen, we're going to hit on the Chiefs, right? We're going to go heavy showdown content. Of course, there's millions of dollars to be made. Then we'll hit on the Bucs, 3-point spread here. Our top props for the Super Bowl 55. Got some great ones that you can use for DFS application. But also, if you're not betting props, if you're not getting some action in on the Super Bowl, I don't know what you're doing breathing at this point, because it gives you life. And then our final predictions, of course, all of that stuff. So let's make it happen. Ben, I'll start with you. The Kansas City Chiefs, technically on the road, right? In this one, laying 3 points. It opened at 3.5. It moved to that key number of 3 and hasn't budged since, which I think makes a lot of sense. Although we do know a lot of the money now is coming in on the Kansas City Chiefs on the spread. The money line actually seeing 57% of money coming in, or handle as one might say, Ben, coming in on the Bucs side of the football. Let's start it off. Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes. What are we projecting? What are we expecting for him today? And how is he fitting into our lineups? Because that's the biggest question.
Yeah, so that's the thing with the Chiefs. It's almost two different questions, because what do I expect? I expect him to be great. He's always great. But you're talking about a $12,000 flex player. For captain, he's going to be very popular, $18,000. That's going to immediately change how you build, because most likely if you go Mahomes at captain, you're going to want one of Kelsey and Tyreek, and we'll get there in a second. But he's, of course, the safest guy out there. I don't think that the foot is a huge issue. I will say that I think his running could be slightly limited. We'll get to that when we talk about some props. But I mean, what is there to say? He's unbelievable. He's great against pressure, and I think that's the theme leading up to this game is both tackles being out. Tampa's front could get a lot of pressure. Mahomes thrives with that, so I'm not overly concerned. I expect him to be great.
Yeah, we've seen Mahomes do an incredible job at evading pressure, Alex, but Ben makes a good point. I think this is a great matchup to watch. This Tampa Bay front seven, this defensive line, can they bring the pass rush? Can they get him a little bit bothered there in the pocket? And what is he going to do in the event that happens? Because if you're bringing a lot of pressure, is that going to open things up for the receivers? We shall see. I personally think this is going to be a really competitive game, which from a showdown standpoint makes it even more interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I think this matchup's really interesting because you take a great passing offense in Kansas City versus a great defense in Tampa. Tampa's strength has really been versus the run most of the year, which Kansas City runs at one of the lowest rates in the NFL. So I expect it to work out a little bit in Kansas City's favor. But as you guys mentioned, there's some injuries along the offensive line that could hinder Mahomes' effectiveness today. That being said, I mean, it's taking him down maybe from a baseline of being by far the best quarterback in the league to just being head and shoulders above the rest. So, I mean, you got to expect the Chiefs to come today with a lot of offense, and it should be a great game.
Who's the halftime show?
It's the Weekend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. The dude with the wild hair?
I've never seen him, man.
Jordan's nodding his head. Yes. Yeah. He's got the wild hair for sure. Let me stick with you for a second, Alex, and talk a little bit of roster construction today. Of course, you'll hear us reference our Awesemo ownership projections, the top plays tool, which, you essentially took the top stack tool and then for Showdown made it into a top, it is a top stacks tool, but really the top plays tool, looking at probabilities that a player finishes as the top overall producer. Of course, you're throwing captains in or in a 2 to 6. So the number one obviously is Patrick Mahomes. And right now he has a 33% chance. So a 33% chance of being the top overall fantasy scorer today and 59% of being in the 2 through 6 spots. Of course, on FanDuel, it's going to be 2 through 5. Does that does that change your mind, or does that make it so Patrick Mahomes is going to be someone you have a lot in the captain spot, or have salary restrictions kind of made it so you've got a ton of Mahomes, but a lot of him's ending up in the utility spot?
Well, I think that Mahomes is an absolute smash play in the utility spot because that really helps you figure out the rest of your roster construction, where if you're projecting Mahomes to have a good game, that means either Kelsey or Hill had a good one. They make great captains in that case. I don't mind him at captain, but it does become a little bit harder since Kelsey and Hill are both pretty expensive. And if you're rostering Mahomes at captain, you're hoping that both of them had pretty good games that don't outscore Mahomes himself. So that is a little bit of a narrow path. But as you're pointing out on my top stacks tool, the showdown plays, he has the highest chance of being the top scorer because he does spread the ball out a little bit, and he has a little bit of rushing ability as well. So I think he's a good play captain, but the roster construction gets a little bit tricky once you put him in there.
Yeah, Ben, and I was looking at it. I saw his passing attempts prop in some spots go from 40.5 up to 41.5. And then even last night when I was putting in some final bets, I saw it at 42.5, pass completion prop around 28.5, juice to the over. So you look at Vegas, you look at where the money's coming in, these lines continue to move up on Patrick Mahomes passing. There's no question that the overall expectation, the broad expectation, is that Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Darrell Williams, whoever's out there, is going to have a very tough time running the ball against this Tampa Bay front. And Patrick Mahomes is going to throw the football. Even first play of the second half was like minus 150 to be a pass.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned it. Tampa's front is no one's going to run on them. And the thing, this is not even, ideally Kansas City would love to run the ball and really control. They don't want to run. Even if they could run, they probably wouldn't. Mahomes likes to throw the ball. That's how that offense thrives. He's got a million weapons. Now he has Sammy Watkins back. It's everything you could ask for. I just think that, with showdown and lineup construction, putting Mahomes in the captain, unless you have a read on somebody not named Ronald Jones, and we'll get to the cheapies, like I don't know exactly how you're going to differentiate. You're going to need one of Kelsey or Hill. And then from there, you just don't have that much money. So I'm going to have a lot of Mahomes like most people, but it's all primarily going to be in the flex. I think there's more high variance guys that are much cheaper to go in the captain spot that you can build around him. And then he's just, a very solid building block of any type of lineup.
All right, so let's talk about Kelsey and Hill then. I know on Friday, you and I did a betting show with Matt Gajewski. It was a lot of fun. Broke down all of our top props for the week. And, of course, all of this can be applied to DFS. And Travis Kelsey's receptions prop, I saw it open at 7.5. He's up to 8.5. Now, he's had 8 receptions, or more than 8 receptions 3 times in 17 games. But for DFS, it doesn't really matter. When you have an 8.5 receptions prop, like, what you're getting week in and week out from Travis Kelsey. So you look at him on today's slate. Our Awesemo ownership projections have him second highest projected owned behind only Patrick Mahomes and sandwiched in between Mahomes and Tyreek Hill. Once again, we have to be expecting pretty immense volume for Travis Kelsey. What are your thoughts on him here coming in at a hefty price point?
Yeah, I mean, what's not to like? The guy's a machine. He had 15 targets against the Bills. You're right. He hasn't gone over 8.5 receptions in that many games, but he also has landed on 8 receptions in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games. So his floor is ridiculous. He sees double-digit targets every week, 6 straight games there. It's hard to imagine that he doesn't at least have a somewhat effective game. He's obviously a favorite to score a touchdown when looking at the Vegas lines. I obviously Tyreek, we saw what he did to Tampa the first time. He has that 50-point upside. Maybe Kelsey doesn't have that, but in terms of floor, there is nobody safer than Travis Kelsey. That's kind of where I lean between the two.
How about you, Alex, when it comes to Kelsey and Tyreek Hill? And is it possible? It is possible because I've done it, but does it work well, at least from your perspective, to get some lineups that have Kelsey, Hill, and Patrick Mahomes all in the same one for the showdown slate?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty strong build because, you got some good cheap options today with guys like Ronald Jones, the kickers. One that I like is Demarcus Robinson. So you are able to kind of create the salary. And there's a huge correlation where if Kelsey and Hill are both in the winning lineup, you better believe Mahomes is, unless we get a Chad Henne day or something like that. So it does give you a really nice correlation. The only question then is, are you going to be able to come up with a lineup that no one else has? Because that's a huge part of Showdown. So that one, I feel like it is going to be a little bit of a chalkier build. What I would do if I have the three, Hill, Kelsey, and Mahomes in the same lineup, maybe leave a little bit of salary on the board so that you're not duplicating with too many people.
Yeah, Ben, same thing to you when it comes to being able to work these guys into lineups, because again, 1, 2, 3 in ownership are Mahomes, Kelsey, and Tyreek Hill. All three of them, top 3 in ownership, all 3 of them coming in at 50+% ownership and 14+% projected ownership in the captain spot alone. So wildly popular options on this Showdown, but also the 3 highest priced players as well in that exact order for very good reason.
Yeah, it's for good reason, but it just makes building extremely problematic.
Like, would you definitely, you're going to have Ronald Jones, right? Like, how do you not have Ronald Jones in those lineups?
He's going to be, I don't know, 80 to 90. Like, I'm just throwing a number out, but I truly believe that of those lineups with those 3, Ronald Jones will be well over 70% in those lineups because he's the obvious pay down. Then you're talking about 2v2s, and you're going to have thousands of people looking for them. There's not that many permutations. It's, to me, impossible to leverage like that. So I get it. You're capturing a ton of the Kansas City offense, which is great. To me, there are just other ways to do it when we're talking about large field tournaments. You have to make a stand, try to find a secondary option on the Chiefs, whether it's one of the backs, whether it's, I don't like Sammy Watkins, but one of those guys, there's a million of them, whether it's him, Robinson, Hardman, Pringle, and then you see what's left. Obviously, Tampa's got their own set of weapons to deal with.
Michael Birmingham says Laffy jinxed Ronald Jones. That ship has sailed, fella. I mean, if that jinx happened, it happened already, and I'm sure it did. Giannino says Ronald Jones MVP. I don't know. I do know. Running back hasn't won an MVP since the turn of the century, and before that, not good run games. All of these guys have rushing props of like under 38 yards. So no, but Alex, I do think though Ronald Jones is going to end up, and we'll get to him in a moment when we talk about the Bucs. Ronald Jones is going to end up in a ton of these lineups where you're rostering the 3 most expensive players in an all-out Kansas City stack.
Yeah, it's funny that you're mentioning the running back for MVP because I remember a couple of years ago when the Chiefs were in the Super Bowl, everyone was like, Damian Williams should have won it, but Mahomes got it. It just shows how like rigged that is.
Exactly.
I don't want to say it like it's a bad thing, but yeah, it's probably going to be Mahomes or Brady being the MVP. But I think the problem with having Mahomes, Kelsey, and Hill, and then running it back with Ronald Jones, I think that's a bad idea because Fournette last game got a huge majority of the routes between the two. And throughout the year, he's been their kind of change of pace guy. So if the Chiefs have a huge day, you'd expect that Tampa Bay is going to be trailing in the game. And that game script leans a little bit more away from Ronald Jones to Leonard Fournette. So I don't love that construction. The way I'd probably save some money is by going to guys like Harrison Butker, Demarcus Robinson, Sammy Watkins. Pretty much, I think Ronald Jones is a very good play. I just don't love him in that lineup.
Right. No, look, I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that. The only argument would be, what if the Tampa Bay Bucs control time of possession and they move the ball slowly downfield, trying to establish the run game, but the Chiefs are just so good at breaking off 80-yard drives in 4 or 5 plays, and then it goes right back to the Bucs and they're efficient moving the ball. But I do think there's a very good argument to be made that Ronald Jones not being your pass catching back at all in this offense really doesn't help you in a Chiefs onslaught stack in most iterations of how this game could play out.
Yeah, I mean, you would need Tampa to kind of run it down their throat early, and it would have to be Tampa leading the entire way with Ronald Jones finding the end zone. That's the thing. Ronald Jones has to score. I don't see any way that he gets there without scoring, whereas Fournette could get there on, say he has 8 targets and he racks up a lot of garbage catches and they're trailing. He could get there in a variety of ways. Now, there's a giant price difference. I totally understand that, but Ronald Jones he makes sense, and I'm definitely going to use him. I'm just not going to use him in the Chiefs onslaught like that. I'm completely in line with Alex.
All right, then let's talk about and by the way, maybe someone said Ronald Jones MVP as like the MVP on FanDuel, isn't it? I don't know. But remember when we were doing those live streams, it was like MVP, what was it? MVP, All-Star, Captain, and it was all guys that, were on a video game. But Alex, let's talk about the peripheral guys here, as everyone loves to say, tertiary options for Kansas City. I already know Ben is not big on Sammy Watkins making his return. Demarcus Robinson activated from the COVID-19 reserve list, so that's a conversation in its own right. Mecole Hardman. And then last week, 2 weeks ago, the championship round, Byron Pringle was out there on a lot of snaps, ran a good amount of routes, and was actually involved in the passing game. So it gets a little bit more difficult now trying to sort through which one of these guys is the ones we want to target today that doesn't have the name Travis Kelsey or Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I think it is trickier because Sammy Watkins is in the mix now, and that makes it tough to know where the work's going to go. I think the most likely outcome is Watkins is full strength, which kind of pushes Byron Pringle out of the rotation, and it reduces the snap count of Demarcus Robinson, and particularly Mecole Hardman. So that's the way I'm playing it, is that I'm projecting Watkins to get about 75% of the snaps like he had been getting when he was healthy, in which case in those games, Demarcus Robinson ran a good amount of routes more than Mecole Hardman, and I feel like Robinson is less of a name brand than Hardman, and he has a lower upside too, which I expect to be compensated by the fact that he's on the field more than Hardman. So I'm kind of leaning towards Robinson between him and Hardman, but I don't mind Hardman. Pringle would be totally off my radar though.
Travis Bickle, nice name, says Sammy Watkins is a false prophet, Ben.
Okay, what does that mean? Is that good? Because I don't think he's going to play well today.
I think, he doesn't mean it in the literal sense, even though it was written in all caps, maybe an exclamation point or two, but more along the lines of Sammy Watkins, the hype train, and Travis, I'm 100% just trying to glean something that probably isn't there from your statement. But Ben, what I think many could take from this is, every time Sammy Watkins is on the field, he's cheap and people fall in love with him, think he's a good value play, and then he sucks. False prophet.
Yeah, when I found out that Sammy Watkins was probably going to return, I didn't think much of it, but more and more I've seen people seem to think that that's a game-changing situation, and it definitely suppresses some of the snap counts and has a domino effect. But for the offense itself, I don't think it's a huge deal. Sammy Watkins wasn't getting a ton of target share in the offense when he was there. They have a million guys. And it's not to say guys like Robinson were completely phased out when he was there. It makes it a little more difficult. That's also assuming that he's completely back to normal. Like, it's a calf injury. He hasn't played since week 16. I don't think that's a given too. So if Sammy Watkins beats me, I'll have to live with it. He's going to have some opportunities. His prop is more than those other guys, but I'm not really there. I would rather pay down and save some salary and take a shot.
Once we get through both of these teams, we're going to talk about what are the best ways to create some leverage and to be different. Alex, I know you threw that tweet out there earlier before the show talking about, hey, we got to do this, because we could talk about every player from both teams. But if we're not talking about how to, really use that to build lineups that can be different on a one-game slate with millions of dollars and a ton of entries and the real application of that, we're not doing anyone any favors. So let's close out the Kansas City Chiefs. Do you want to talk about the run game here, Alex?
Yeah, definitely. I think the run game is really tricky because Darrell Williams got more work than Allaire last game. And it was Clyde Edwards-Allaire's first game back, but the rushing attempts was skewed 13-6 in favor of Williams. So that was a bit surprising that earlier in the season it had been mostly Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But when it came to routes, Helaire ran routes on 19 dropbacks while Williams was out on 12. So last game, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was used as the change of pace back more than the power runner. But throughout the season, that hadn't been the case. It had been Clyde Edwards-Helaire as the clear number one with either Darrell Williams or Le'Veon Bell backing him up. So I'm kind of going back to those priors, hoping that 2 weeks of healing makes Clyde Edwards-Helaire 100%. And I'm just assuming that he gets the bulk of the workload today. And I think I'm not expecting Le'Veon Bell to really get much action because the team showed in the playoffs they really prefer Darrell Williams. So I'm off of Bell.
Yeah, and Ben, I don't know if it was because Clyde Edwards-Helaire wasn't at full strength, still returning from that injury. It's possible. I'm not sure. But from everything I'm seeing, and props-wise, from what we can take from the past couple of weeks, or at least with Clyde Edwards-Helaire on the field, it does feel like this is shaping up to be a timeshare. But maybe Andy Reid decides that he's going to run with the hot hand. The problem is, can anyone get hot against this Tampa Bay run defense that ranks number one in DVOA, number one in yards allowed on the season against the run?
No, but the thing about the Chiefs offense is they can utilize these guys in a variety of ways. Those are the type of backs. That's why they drafted him. He can catch the ball. So there are ways that he can get there. And the other thing, timeshares are never good, but when you have a prolific offense like this, everybody can coexist. Like if they score 38, 40 points, which is in the realm, I'm not saying it's likely, like both of them could be effective. They can have plenty of work, even if they're not running it through Tampa's front, which I would say is unlikely. So I think Edwards-Helaire is fine. It's just the question you have to ask yourself is, if the Chiefs win and they're leading, does he still have enough volume in the passing game? Because I don't see carries really materializing. I don't think if he gets 10, 12 carries, that means much, because I don't think they can run against that front.
Our boy Over Under in chat, Ben, says, Le'Veon Bell is my sleeper, at least one touchdown. What would you put the odds at that Le'Veon Bell scores a touchdown? As a matter of fact, I can find the implied odds if you just give me a second.
Yeah, no, I don't see that happening. I'm not going to lie. It's just an opportunity thing. I doubt he will see many chances.
Implied odds on Bell scoring a touchdown are 13%. It's actually higher than I thought, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that is.
Well, you gotta love the narrative here where Bell is facing his old teammate Antonio Brown. Clearly, these two are going to be the reasons why Tampa or Kansas City win this one.
Well, Alex, any other thoughts on – I'm not even going to entertain that. Any other thoughts on the Chiefs before we talk Tampa Bay?
I think we got to talk about Harrison Butker. I mean, he was one of the best fantasy kickers in the entire season. I'm not even joking. Jordan's sitting over here cracking up behind the glass, but – no one likes to play kickers in fantasy, but they work really well in certain lineups. Like a lot of lineups, I'm targeting the game to not be a touchdown fest. And in those games, if a drive didn't turn into a touchdown, that means the chance that there was a field goal was higher. So if there's a game today with a lot of field goals, I think it could be a print fest with your Butker lineups.
Fair enough. Ben, any thoughts on Butker or the Chiefs defense?
Yeah, I mean, listen, they score so many points that all it takes. The one thing that I don't love about Kansas City is they're at times very aggressive. So that you want every opportunity that's fourth and short to result in a field goal attempt. Andy Reid takes some of those away, but it's such a high scoring offense that does help the kicking situation. I don't think I'm going to go to the Chiefs defense. We'll talk about the Tampa defense. They're a little more interesting for me.
Before we talk about them, let's talk about our sponsor, No House Advantage. They've been sponsoring this show all season long, and it's time to move up to the big leagues today, baby, because you got the $25,000 Super Bowl contest tonight with $10,000 up top to first place. What a beautiful thing that is. And is there any better time to try out No House Advantage than during the Super Bowl where you're already looking at props. You already have a good read on props because that's what this is. It's prop betting against peers, not the house, in contest form. So if you really like a prop, right? Like Ben really likes Sammy Watkins under 3.5 receptions. He's putting that up top as his highest confidence one. Maybe there's another one you don't feel great about. That's number 8, but it's in contest form, GPP format, 10K to first place. And here is another phenomenal aspect of playing at No House Advantage. All of the projections that we have that Alex built himself are free at Awesemo.com. Completely free projections. You can look at what we have them projected for, and you can match that up against what the props are. And while you'll see certain props change throughout the week, I said I saw Kelsey move from 7.5 to 8.5, or you see another passing yards or completions prop move up or move down. Everything is static. Everything that came out earlier in the week is still there. So you can really find that edge if you take the time to do it and use our tools completely free in order to accompany you and make the money over at No House Advantage. And another thing, there's a lot of good things, so bear with me here. If you use the promo code Awesemo, you get $25 in free play. This is not a match. This is not a drip bonus, which all of us love so much. This is a free $25 just free play, $25 without having to deposit a single thing using the promo code Awesemo. And then they'll match your first deposit up to $100, which is valid only today. So use the projections, use the Awesemo promo code. When you deposit, if you decide to get that $100 complete match and check out No House Advantage, download the app today, $25,000 Super Bowl contest, 10K up top. Why? What's the reason not to do it? $25 free to go play on the site, and then $100 match. Use the promo code Awesemo at No House Advantage. All right, let's flip it over to the. Sorry, go ahead.
I got one thing about No House Advantage I want to add here because
Please.
I know we're all looking for a little sweat today or a little gamble. Everyone always wants lineups. We actually have a page where you can just download the No House Advantage lineups from our optimal lineups. So as far as just an easy sweat, that's probably going to be among the highest ROI you can get.
Love it. And all that's free. All right. Let's talk about Tampa Bay, Ben. Tom Brady, 9 Super Bowls. This will be his 10th. You love the man so much, don't you? All you want is for long-term sustainable success from Tom Brady and another ring on his finger. What do we do with Tom Brady today? 4th highest projected owned player at Awesemo.com's ownership. And his probability to be the top overall scorer is 2nd behind only Mahomes, but he is a ways back.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a quarterback. He's got a ton of weapons. They could be trailing, so he could push for 40 attempts. All of that is good. He's obviously not going to run the ball. He's got what you want, and he makes it. It's just, again, you're talking about $10,000 for a flex spot there. So he is very expensive. The question is, do you want to just find a little more and just get Mahomes? Or are you going to play both quarterbacks? The problem with playing both quarterbacks is then you really can't get their main weapon. So, like, what are you playing them for? They can't run. That's going to make it really difficult. So I don't mind Brady particularly. There's scenarios where they really have to throw the ball a ton. He can rack up a ton of yards. Obviously, he's got Godwin. He's got Evans. Antonio Brown has practiced in full. He is good to go. So I see it. It's just, again, I'm not sure he's going to be my captain, but similar to Mahomes, I think he's a fine flex play if you have that money.
So, Ben, one of the reasons I love doing shows with you and Alex outside of your joyful personalities is the fact that Alex crunches lineups and you hand build lineups. So we get a really interesting dynamic here. Have you built any that have Mahomes and Tom Brady in them?
So, again, I tried to do that, but the problem I had was you're really looking for – you're going to need some weird touchdown variants where the main guys, particularly for Kansas City, that's the only way that could work, I think, is if Kelsey and Hill have moderate to, unsuccessful games. And then you look, say, like Evans does his thing and you get Hardman or Pringle or Robinson or whoever there. I guess the other out would be Mahomes runs one in, but I'm very low probability on that. So most of my lineups only have one quarterback or none, honestly. I didn't like the 2 QB build this week.
How about you, Alex?
I have a good amount of lineups with both. I think that Mahomes, you can pretty much just plug in any lineup if you have the money. And Brady, I mean, great play as well. And the thing I like about having quarterbacks is it really helps you nail down the other spots in your lineup, because if the quarterback's having a big day or big enough to be in the winning lineup, that means at least one receiver is as well. So maybe if you have both of them, you throw one receiver in the captain spot, one receiver for the other quarterback in the flex at least, and then you have 4 of your roster spots already kind of locked down with correlations, so that's pretty good.
So, Alex, we've got Tom Brady throwing to myriad options here, which is why we'll talk MVP shortly, why I think you got to bet a quarterback, one of these guys, to win the MVP, depending on what team you like. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But he spreads the ball around a lot. We've seen games where he's completed passes to like 10 different pass catchers. You have Chris Godwin, you have Mike Evans, you have Antonio Brown, who was questionable throughout the week, but he is expecting to practice fully on Thursday and Friday. You have Leonard Fournette, who is holding 4+ receptions in each of his last 3 games, all of which came in the postseason. There are a lot here, and even Gronk can get involved. Cameron Brate can get involved. Scotty Miller can get involved. We'll start it off with the big guns in Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and I guess you could throw Brown into that category. How are you feeling about them tonight?
I think you made a lot of good points about how Brady, it's a little bit tough to predict where the passes go because he kind of spreads it around the different positions. It throws more to running back than some other QBs. Still, the guys I'm really looking at are Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. They're out there almost every single drop back, whereas Antonio Brown in his last couple of games has only been there about 6 out of 10 plays, which makes it a lot harder for him to rack up the fantasy points. So definitely looking at Evans and Godwin. The fact that neither one is like a clear alpha is kind of encapsulated in the cost. And I noticed Godwin's props are higher than Evans, but Evans has a better chance of getting a touchdown, at least from what we've seen, being the bigger receiver. So I think it's pretty much a wash. I like them both.
Ben, I know you're a big Chris Godwin guy all season long. Been trying to catch that lightning in a bottle. Did we get it tonight?
Yeah, I mean, got to stop the drops. He drops more passes, this guy. It's really unbelievable, but the targets are there. I mean, the 3 playoff games, 28 targets. I can live with that. Like, if you're going to tell me that Godwin gets 10 to 12 looks again, I will live with the results. He's been only catching 4 or 5 of those type of looks, but the opportunity, the upside, it's all there. Now, the red zone equity definitely it goes to Evans. He's just a better guy there, but I think the home run ability is more in Godwin's favor. You look at Scotty Miller, you look at AB, those guys, they definitely could get there. They're just going to have less opportunities, I would say, in the whole. So the way this game unfolds, I like Godwin's price point. I like everything I'm really seeing. He just needs to finally kind of put it all together. Now would be a good time to do it because we don't exactly have any more weeks.
Who's your highest owned receiver in this game?
Godwin.
It is God, on both sides.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know why I asked.
Yeah. What are you doing here?
I don't know why I asked. Alex, so we all like Godwin. You say you like Evans as well. Then we start getting into this gray area, right? Where it's really difficult to try and predict who's going to get the ball here. I've said a lot this season that at least in showdown slates, I'm willing to take some shots on Gronk, not because I'm confident at all, but because since week 4, when he started to look like his former self in some capacity, he's averaging 15.5 yards per reception. And Brady likes to throw downfield to him, and he'll also look to him sometimes in the end zone. He's super cheap. Could it be that he comes up short or comes up with 0 receptions today? He can. But I think it's just another point that him and Cameron Brate are 2 more options that can really muddy the waters in this pass game for Tampa.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Gronk and Brate, I mean, they've both had some big games. Last game, I should say, it was a little bit more clear that Gronk was running more routes than Brate. He saw 23-13 for Brate. So I think that helped me feel a little bit more confident in Gronk's role and less confident in Brate. And given that Brate got 5 targets in the last game, I'm expecting people maybe don't dig too deep into the snap counts and they're a little bit overconfident in Brate. So I'm probably fading him completely. Gronk, I feel like, is a solid option, but nothing to get a bit too excited about because He's been targeted at about 18% of the time he's been running a route. Very average number. And then he's running routes on about 60% of plays. So he's your fourth best option after Antonio Brown.
Okay. Yeah. Ben, talk to me about the secondary pass catchers, including the tight ends here. Which one of them do you think you'll be getting the most of? Because you're going to have to get somewhere, right? In some lineups.
Yeah. I mean, I guess part of this is kind of being pot committed, which is something you try to not do. But I've been on Gronk, and I thought there were a couple games where they used him for blocking. And then last week, I thought in particular, it was just a raw deal. Like his role did not equate to the targets that he should have gotten. And if we see that again, I do think it'll flip. Brady, from all what I've seen, the injury is not a big deal. He's good to go. But again, just looking at the role these guys play, I would take the savings every time with Gronk. I'm sure there's an unquantifiable aspect to it. It's Gronk and Brady. And if they are trailing, I do think that can only benefit with all the big games that they've been in. But more so than that, I just feel more comfortable with where Gronk is at. I'm not running to play either of them, to be honest, though.
Let's talk about the backfield here then. Ben, I think before we get into the run game, let's talk about Leonard Fournette in a pass catching capacity. And the reason I say this is you look at what he's done this postseason, and I know Ronald Jones was out for one of those games, but he had 4 for 4 against Washington receptions, 5 receptions on 6 targets against New Orleans, and then 5 of 7 against Green Bay. All those games, obviously, but they also never trailed by any considerable margin, if at all. I can't remember, but they were never playing from behind. There is a decent probability that they play from behind today, and Leonard Fournette is even more involved as a pass catcher. So what do you think there is how these two running backs on the Bucs break down as pass catchers? Because this is going to play really heavily into how we're building lineups.
Yeah, I think this is where, this is the crutch of Showdown in general. This is where you need to tell a story of what you think happens in the game. Because if you really think that the Chiefs get up and are really rolling, I don't know how you go to Ronald Jones, to be honest. It's not to say that you shouldn't play him, but if you play him, those lineups, you really need to think that Tampa controls the game on the ground. Maybe not the whole way, but at some point. So to me, again, both of those paths have some merit and have some equity, but there's also the price point. Fournette is obviously his increased role has equated to an increased salary. So you have to factor that in. Ronald Jones is an obvious pay down option, but we talked about this at the top when we were talking about Kelsey, Hill, and Mahomes. Everybody sees that. So you just have to be cognizant of where you're putting him into lineups.
Same to you, Alex. When it comes to the running backs in this situation, you're looking likely at another timeshare on the ground, and then almost exclusively Leonard Fournette through the air. At least that's what we've been seeing over the past maybe month of football.
I don't feel very confident in that split. It has been what we've seen in the last couple of games where Ronald Jones barely ran any routes at all. And that previous game before the last two, he was injured in pregame or something, the one where he had that quad. Yeah, so that was I'm sorry for bringing that up, guys. I hate to bring back those old wounds because I was super on Ronald Jones that day. But the thing is, prior to that game, Ronald Jones had been getting more of the work throughout the year than Fournette, at least on the ground. As far as games were both played, and when it comes to routes run, it was a little bit of flip-flopping throughout the year where Jones did see more routes than Fournette on a few occasions, but mostly Fournette saw more. So one of the props I actually like is there's a book that has a 2.5 over-under on Ronald Jones receiving yards. So I'm kind of feeling that. It wouldn't surprise me to see him play maybe 40% of the receiving plays, just depending on which one of him and Fournette gets going today.
All right, you heard the man, Ben. Give me your backfield breakdown here. Not just, of course, what we're thinking, but how we play this with the salary, because on DraftKings in the utility spot, Leonard Fournette is $7,800. Ronald Jones is $2,200. Massive disparity in price point here.
Yeah, that's the thing. You have to consider, Ronald Jones doesn't need to do nearly as much as Fournette. the difference that I think is a little concerning is if Ronald Jones doesn't have a uptick in the passing game here, he is drawing to what I would say is a touchdown. Whereas Fournette has the luxury on a full point PPR site of getting there on pure volume, the end of the half, end of the game. You can really rack up quick, easy catches. We see it all the time with like the Kamaras of the world. So there is that, but going to Jones is so intoxicating because it opens up the ability to get permutations up top that are just not, Fournette is a like he hinders your lineups when you put him in there. He doesn't help it. Ronald Jones does the opposite. So at $2,200 for the flex, I get why people are going there, and I'm one of them in a lot of spots.
Yep. And we have Corey Randall asking, Alex, would playing Fournette and Ronald Jones be too cute on a DraftKings GPP single bullet?
I think it's fun to have both in the same lineup. When teams run the ball a ton, a lot of times they like to spread it around between two guys instead of having one guy just be a straight up workhorse. So that's what I would expect with the Bucs today, given that there's no clear alpha there. So I think that if you play both Ronald Jones and Fournette, throw in the Bucs defense, you're clearly planning for the Chiefs to really struggle in that kind of build. So it's going to be very contrarian. I do have some lineups like that. And once on Super Draft where they have the multipliers, I had more lineups like that because you get like more fantasy points when those guys get on the board. So that was a surprising thing I had there is a lot of lineups with both of them.
If you go to oddshopper.awesemo.com, you guys already know this, but it is totally free as well. And you can check out all of the matchups, where the money's coming in, where the bets are coming in, line movement, the movement on the money line, on the spread. You can check out every prop out there for receiving yards, rushing yards, passing yards, touchdowns, all of that from all different books right next to each other to figure out which one is the best, which one has the best odds. You can track your bets. You can set notifications. Ben, there's not much you can't do over there at OddsShopper, and it's totally free.
Totally free. Yeah. There's no better day than today to check it out because there are so many props and there's so many books and there's so many lines. You're going to find discrepancies, and then you can take advantage of these little things. The matchup page kind of tells the story, similar to what we're talking about with Showdown. Like you have to find ways to say, okay, if this happens and I get this part right, what are the other pieces? Like if you knew the score of the game, that's how you kind of have to do it, work backwards. If you knew the final score of the game, who would you say is most likely to get an uptick or a downgrade? That's how I try to approach it. You mentioned, Luffy, that I hand build, and that's kind of where I do it. I pick specific scores of the game, specific narratives, and then I build backwards to try to make effective teams.
The Millie Maker's already filled, so that should tell you all you need to know on DraftKings. Wow. Alex, I think it's time for us to hit on the ways we're going to be different. This is what's made you so much money doing this. You as well, Ben. I know last year taking second in the Millie Maker main slate, not a showdown slate, but just having one or two pieces that are vastly different from everyone else. But then the rest of your lineup looks pretty normal. Alex, how are we doing that today? That's the biggest question coming into the Super Bowl.
So I think the easiest way is leaving money on the table. One strategy that I'd avoid that I saw was coming up a lot when I ran some lineups is a lot of lineups you're capping out the salary cap by spending down on a really bad punt play in the like $200 to $600 range. So those would be guys like LaShawn McCoy and Deion Yelder, for instance, guys that really don't play very much. Or Demarcus Robinson at 1.4K. I think he may be a little bit more likely to play. Not a bad play, but definitely someone that if it's the last guy in, you're going to dupe a lot of people if you're spending all 50K. So my strategy is to have some of these lower price guys like Jones and Robinson, guys that people really wouldn't get in their lineups except as the last man in, except I'm just doing that and leaving money on the table so that when they do have a good game, like 10 plus points, maybe they'll outscore that 2 to 4K range, and then you're in business to win a big prize pool solo.
Same question to you, Ben. What are we doing to be different today? It's going to be needed for even smaller field tournaments.
No doubt. I think with these teams specifically, certainly the general principles of Showdown Alex just talked about with leaving money on the table, things like that. I think for these teams specifically, it's just getting a depending on how many teams you play, but getting a batch outside of those big name guys that have the opportunity. I think it's pretty clear that somebody on the Chiefs outside of the big two, I guess I'll call them Hill and Kelsey, is going to have an effective game. And then if you can get that guy, what Alex just talked about is you're boxing out hundreds and thousands of like 1v1s and 2v2s. If you have those pretty sturdy building blocks around them, whether it's the quarterbacks or a solid back in someone like Fournette, if you think he racks up the catches. So for me, I'm just trying to separate. There's a handful of guys on both teams that I think are the keys to the slate. Not that they're the most important, but they have the widest range of outcomes. Like Antonio Brown for me on the Bucs. I could see him being a non-factor, but I could also see him having a huge game. There's not that many guys that can do that. And those are the type of plays that can make all the difference if you get it right.
Derrick Rose to the New York Knicks. Dennis Smith Jr. moves on from that wonderful Kristaps.
I wonder what that'll do to his top shot. Don't up that value.
Not going to lie, I thought about it as well. All right, guys, it's time to talk about some top props for the game. Even if you're not betting, this is DFS applicable, but you should be betting. Why not? It's the Super Bowl. It's the greatest betting day of the year. But first, get us to 500 likes. We got, 1,700 people, only 325 likes. We love you guys. Show us some love back. Hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Also hit that notification bell as well. So let's do it. I'm going to throw mine at you first, Ben, then we'll go to you. We go to you, Alex, as well. For me, here's one that I love, and it is betting the quarterback to win the MVP if whatever team you like. So whether it's Tom Brady plus 190, you could have got him at plus 210. I think they're still plus 200 in some spots. If you think the Bucs win it, you got to go Brady. It's his first year in Tampa. They're playing in Tampa. He spreads the ball out. A defensive player might get it, but in order to do that, you're going to need Mahomes to turn the ball over enough, and that simply is very unlikely to happen. Tom Brady, when you've got people voting on who the MVP is going to be, unless it's like that 13-3 game where Edelman got it a couple of years ago, it's going to be him or it's going to be Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes shouldn't have won it last year. Williams should have, and Mahomes still got it. When it's a subjective voting process with only a couple minutes to make that vote, where the guys that they call GOAT and Baby GOAT are certainly the biggest names in this game, no question about it. Give me one of those to win the MVP today. I'm going Brady. Ben, what do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to stick with what I've kind of been saying. I think that in a normal week, Sammy Watkins wouldn't even have a prop because the books wouldn't put it out there. They've been forced to line it because it's the Super Bowl, and I think that there's a lot of scenarios where he's a pseudo decoy. So 3.5 receptions, it is slightly juiced to the under, but not enough for me. I think there's a lot of scenarios where he's just doesn't see that much work. So I'm going to go under 3.5 catches for Sammy Watkins.
All right. I saw that one coming. What about you, Alex? Who do you got? Favorite prop, top prop for Super Bowl 55?
I got a couple. One, I see that Byron Pringle has this receptions prop of 0.5. Of course, I'm always liking these really obscure players because I feel like the sports books don't really know how to price these. And with Pringle, I mean, once you pop, the fun don't stop. But the thing is, I just don't expect the pop to happen. I don't expect him to be on the field very much with Watkins back. So this over-under at 0.5 receptions, with the under getting plus 150, I'm like, he's only going to be on the field for maybe like 6 plays. So how lucky do you have to get from to not get a catch in 6 snaps, right? So I feel pretty good about that one. The other one, I'm betting tails because this is really the only day where you can do that, and it's a super degen bet. But fortunately, the juice on that bet is pretty low, so it's not really that much different than betting on like a hand of blackjack or something. And we're all here having fun, so why not get a little split before we get the game going?
I think it's minus 103. Not bad.
Yeah,
not bad.
I think I bet like $500, and the juice was like $5.
That's solid. For those of you guys that have rode the Ronald Jones train with me over the past couple of weeks, sometimes it's worked this season. We had some great Ronald Jones games, like that 91-yard touchdown, big stuff. but it's been very hit or miss. I will say, though, it's the Super Bowl, last game of the year. I'm going Ronald Jones, top rusher, plus 275. I think that's a perfectly reasonable bet here when you consider what the likelihood of that happening is. Got implied odds of like 27%. I don't hate that. I think Arians could go with the hot hand on the ground if this game stays close. So give me Ronald Jones, top rusher, plus 275. That's the long shot. And another long shot, if we're trying to have some fun here, we're not trying to go with the sharpest bets, although there was some sharp action on this one, moved it a lot. Kansas City, Tampa Bay, halftime, full-time, which means Kansas City is leading at the half. Tampa Bay wins it at the end of the game, plus 700. So there's a couple you want to throw a few dollars on, get a nice sweat in throughout the game. Some fun ones for sure. Ben, give me a couple others.
So I think that you could go Antonio Brown first touchdown. I've seen that upwards of 16-1. To me, that's just, if you're looking for a longer shot, something along those lines. The one thing we didn't really talk about, if you think that Kansas City really can't stop them in terms of the offensive line issues, you could go crazy and say someone like Shaq Barrett for MVP if he gets a strip sack, if he scores somehow. I think that's highly unlikely, of course, but there are guys on Tampa's front that if you think they get to Mahomes and the game is really ugly, maybe that's a possibility. There are props on defensive side of the ball for the Super Bowl.
Okay. Alex, anything else here, or we pretty much wrap it up?
So one thing I will mention is a lot of sites have promos you can take advantage of for the Super Bowl.
Huge ones, yeah.
So one that I saw is on DraftKings. They let you bet that there would be at least a touchdown in the game, and it was like minus 10,000 or something. And I was like, man, I really don't want to lose like $1,000 to win 10, but the odds are actually in your favor on that kind of bet. The other
you're going to lay 10,000 down to win 100?
10,000 to win 100. Yeah. Sorry, did I say it wrong?
No, I'm saying, are you going to do it?
I don't know. I was trying to do some math, and I'm like, if they're scoring touchdowns on like 20% of drives, what is the chance that none of them will result in a touchdown? And I was like, that's too complicated. Anyway.
And it's only $100 that you're winning anyway, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But there's some fun ones. Like you can bet on the color of Gatorade to be dumped on the winning coach. It looks like orange is the chalk at plus 150. You can get some real odds on purple at plus 800. You guys have any picks for me on that one?
I know Ben sleuthed the shit out of that last year. I think you got a little read on it this year as well.
Yeah, so the Chiefs used, to my knowledge, orange last year when they won. I think that's teams tend to be superstitious because everyone thought it was going to be purple last year because of Kobe, and then it wasn't. I have seen some things that there are people saying that there's going to be no Gatorade bath. That has taken some money, that they're just not going to do it because of COVID or whatever. So maybe that's, I don't know. I don't make the rules. I'm just reporting the news here, man. I would go with orange, though.
Okay. And my favorite one, last one, guys, listen up. This is a crazy trend. Brady's played 9 Super Bowls. It's the most we've seen from any quarterback, any player. It's got to be. The point totals for the Patriots or Brady-led offenses or Brady-led teams after the first quarter are 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 3, 0. In 9 games, he scored 0 points in 8 of them, 3 points in 1 of them. That was against the Eagles. And in those 9 games, the average total score at the end of the first quarter is 3 total points. 5 of them have been 0-0 through 1 quarter. 3 more have been 3-0, 3-0, 9-0, and 9-3. So 10.5 over under, 10.5 total. It's juiced to the under, but still I like that. And if this trend continues, which it's been 9 Super Bowls, Brady's been terrible to get started. Maybe it changes, but if not, Tampa Bay under 6.5 points in the first quarter. So here we go. We got less than a minute to go, and then we're turning this bad boy over to the Live Before Lock crew to bring you up to 5 p.m. Eastern time. That'll be Josh Engleman, Chris Spags, and Matt Gajewski. It's a 3-man booth. Our final predictions. Alex, we are up against it, but who are you picking to win this game? And you're taking the over or the under on the total of 56 points?
I think I'd go Chiefs and the under. I think that Tampa Bay has been pretty inconsistent throughout the year. Brady's numbers haven't been all that impressive, and he almost set a record for the most interceptions in the game. At least him and Rodgers combined or whatever, they're just throwing picks all over the place. So I'm not really convinced Tampa Bay can really get it going. So that's why I'm leaning towards the Chiefs, who have one of the best offenses in football. Then I feel like all the handles coming in on the over. I think I saw like 70% of the money in bets are on the over. I think it's just people like to bet the over, so I'm going to do the opposite of it, bet the under.
All right, Ben.
Yeah, I'm with him. Chiefs and the under. I think the Chiefs are just too good. I think the game as a whole is a little methodical, but not that's going to go way under. But yeah, Chiefs. I'll say 31-17.
All right. I'm going Bucs 27-24. So Bucs in the under, as a matter of fact. Guys, it's been awesome doing this show and have you hang out with us all year, whether you started with us years ago this year or you're new to the channel. We really appreciate you hanging out. Best of luck today. Win some money. Hammer those props. Win some money there at No House Advantage. Take down that 10K top prize. Someone win the millie and stick around. The trio of fellas coming up next. It's live before lock. It's been an awesome season. Thanks, guys.
Enjoy.
Good show, guys.
Boys.
Good luck.
Josh, Justine was watching the show today. She said, tell Josh purple is his color. I said,
That's right.
I said,
She's right.
He has no colors. There are no colors.
I have so much purple in my closet.
There's just gross.
Oh, she texted me that anyway.
Later, boys. Have a good show.
See you
Later
later.
on. He's about to make a baby joke there. He got out of here quick enough.
Well, that's keep it classy. I think when someone's about to give birth in a couple.
Nah. Can't do it. You guys are gonna have to carry me more than usual on this one, boys.
Why's that?
Just had fried chicken, biscuits and gravy, fried egg type jam. Oh, I'm ready to go to sleep.
That's bold.
It's a recipe for a nap. I feel like in the first quarter.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, let's do it. What is up, everyone? You have a couple hours left till the Super Bowl kicks off, but you are in your final hour of Awesemo content today for the Showdown slate. Big one to talk about. I'm Chris Spags, joined by a man you know and love, a man who's made people a lot of money this year. And you know what I'm doing, Josh. I'm doing the misdirection. It's Matt Gajewski. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing great, man. I'm happy to be here today. I can't believe we've made it this far.
We have. It's a big time here. A guy like Matt's going to help you guys out a lot today with some of the hidden wrinkles in today's game. We'll get back to him in a second. But here's the other guy here, a man you just heard joking about impregnating his coworker's wife. He's Josh Engleman. How you doing, Josh?
That was not where the joke was going. That's not at all where the joke was going. I feel like I am pregnant with a fried chicken biscuit with sausage gravy and a fried egg. That feels like it's ready to be birthed at this point in time. It's Super Bowl Sunday. It's fun stuff.
Hopefully not live on the show will Josh be giving birth to his little baby of Southern foods, but we are giving birth to a special deal for you guys today with No House Advantage, who's taken a different spin on daily fantasy sports by offering prop bet contests across the NBA, MLB, NFL, and PGA for cash prizes. And today they have a special deal going where if you use the promo code Awesemo at nohouseadvantage.com or by downloading their app in the App Store to search No House Advantage, give you $25 in free play. And this one's particularly important because as of right before the show, they have a tournament going on. They've actually filled a couple of their tournaments today with some of the increased prize money going. If you use that promo code Awesemo, you can use your $25 in free play to play in their Super Bowl Showdown matchup. $25K guaranteed, $10K to first with a $25 entry. So that could be free for you right now. So go over to nohouseadvantage.com, play on there. It's really a DFS site with prop betting components. You're picking your favorite props. Some of the ones that Alex has today, actually our No House Advantage projections are free today too. But some of the top props, the under on Darrell Williams,
the under on Scotty Miller's receptions. Josh, I know you follow this stuff too, but any no house advantage props that you feel like you would want to lock in if you were playing with that free entry today?
I would have definitely had a really good answer for this if I knew that question was coming.
Well, you know what? I think one of Josh's favorite ones would be Rob Gronkowski, the over on receptions for him, because that one, according to Awesemo, has a 61% chance of hitting. And Gronk is, I'm sure, a play that Josh has a lot of as a value. We'll talk about that, but play at no house advantage and then use that promo code Awesemo, $25 in free play for you guys because they want to get you guys in there. Matt, I'm going to ask you the first big question here. And I want to just know what your process was building lineups today, because I think there's going to be a couple players that some of us may find unavoidable. I'm just wondering if there was anyone when you were building, whether it be a Buck or a Chief, that you just get a lot of and you just can't get away from.
I'm getting a lot of Ronald Jones, and I think it's because he's the one cheap guy that's guaranteed for at least some production. The other players in that range, we're talking about Gronk and Byron Pringle and a few others, but Ronald Jones is someone I've been having a hard time getting away from just because of that locked in production at the price.
Josh, are you with it too? Because we were both nodding our heads along with this one. And Ronald Jones was somebody I crunched 500 lineups, ended up getting, I think, 98% Ronald Jones in my sorting process. Cut him down again, got 50% Ronald Jones. Cut him down again, still have 50% Ronald Jones. So I'm with you, Matt. Josh, are you also on Team Ronald Jones today, hoping that his price point opens up enough and hopefully he sneaks into the end zone somehow?
I am. He ranked as one of the better leverage plays when I did my showdown videos yesterday, and that's holding true right now. He's just wildly, as far as I'm concerned, wildly underpriced for the potential for the role. It's just a price tag that doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
So on the other side, I'm curious your guys' thoughts on Leonard Fournette, because he was somebody with his price point on DraftKings Showdown I thought was really difficult to actually force my way into lineups. Gave him the 3 thumbs up on there just to see what would happen. And he got in there a little bit, but still not as much as you might think for a guy who's been leading the pack here. And Matt, I think you know as well as anybody following these games as closely as you do, Fournette's, starting the games off also as the pass catching back. So normally two check boxes that we want to see hit for a guy that we're going to play in DFS. But Fournette with the price point, is he somebody you're getting to at all, given the fact that we're all going to be on Ronald Jones's value, I think a certain amount? Is it worth trying to force your way to Fournette just to try to get that potential leverage?
I think you can get to Fournette for the reasons you mentioned, primarily the pass catching. With the game script projected to go the Chiefs' way here, we should see Tampa Bay throwing the ball. Fournette obviously fits that mold. I was a little at least concerned to see Fournette still coming in with 33% ownership, which is actually a little high from where I thought he would be. So as far as fading Fournette, if that 33% ownership holds, I'm actually okay going under the field on that.
Josh, how do you feel about it? Are you willing to get to Fournette, or is the fact that right now with our ownership projections at Awesemo, we have Fournette projected for about double the ownership of Ronald Jones, maybe a little bit more than that. And I think that sort of makes Jones appealing, though wouldn't shock me if that number comes up for the reasons we mentioned with Jones. Are you buying the ownership on Fournette, and are you trying to get there, or is he somebody you're willing to get under the field on?
He's someone that I would probably want to be a little bit under the field on. I still think he looks like a fantastic play. I actually, the guys talked about it a little bit towards the end of the show, but towards the end of the deeper dive. I actually like the combination of having Fournette and Jones in the same lineup. One, it feels like a scenario where people wouldn't want to do that a lot if they're building their lineup manually. And I think that lends a little bit of an interesting build. Plus with Jones's low ownership, that helps as well. So I would be more likely to have like double lineups with Fournette and Jones, but just Fournette on his own, I think that's a spot where you can get a little bit different by just having less.
Okay, yeah, I think that's the ownership, as we mentioned, about 33% expected to go to Fournette overall, so he's certainly not underrepresented, but with the value opportunity, it's possible that Jones gets up a little bit more than the 15% we have projected for him. And you can also get all this data that we have. If you want to play some Super Bowl lineups, you have a couple hours. Go to the awesemo.com/join page. Our NFL weekly package there will actually get you all of the data right now because there's only 1 day left in the season, so it's a good deal on there, less than $4 to get you everything we have for today's slate, so make sure to get in there at awesemo.com/join. Is there another value play, Matt, that you find you're also getting to amount? Because I think here's one that when I lowered my minimum projection for Fantasy Cruncher, Ricky Seals-Jones was popping up a lot, a prop bet play more than one that I want in DFS. I think also Demarcus Robinson, a little bit higher price, but one I think has a more viable pathway to being useful today. So those are two more for me, Matt. But anybody else that you feel like is in the same Ronald Jones territory of being someone you're getting a lot of, even though on paper, maybe not the most exciting plays in the world?
Yeah, I'm definitely not getting anyone in that range as much as Ronald Jones, but a couple other names I do have a fair amount of. The Chiefs ancillary pass catchers, so not just Robinson, but I have some Hardman. He's not exactly the cheapest, but also Sammy Watkins and even a little Byron Pringle. On the Tampa Bay side, I've gotten a fair amount of Gronk. I think the pricing between Gronk and Cameron Brate has just diverged a little too much. Now we get Gronk as a value.
Yeah, Gronk also healthy. Brate coming off the back injury, though. Apparently he's feeling fine. At least that's the most recent report on him. But Brate did find himself limited in practice more than you would expect going into the Super Bowl because of back spasms. Gronk at his price point, I think, because of that, becomes even more appealing. Josh, how about you? Gronk, Demarcus Robinson, and again, Ricky Seals-Jones right there for you. So any of these guys seem appealing to you more than the others?
Well, certainly not Ricky Seals-Jones. I believe that's cousin Sal's like really weird bet for the Super Bowl this week. So kudos to you for getting onto that train. That seems like it'll go really, really well. If we're talking about I don't really have anybody that I'm like wildly interested in at low ownership right now that I don't feel like everybody else is already on. This is a really difficult slate because I don't know if it's just because it's the Super Bowl, but it feels like a lot of this is really efficient right now.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. And we got to talk about the kickers. We got a super chat first here from Tom Frohl asking for, actually really demanding, not even asking, but at least put it in question form. Maybe a please might be nice, but he gave us money, so fine. He said, give me top super draft plays. We'll give you
I was thinking that it was two super draft plays and he spelled it wrong. So I guess we can go in either direction.
Honestly, yeah, I'm going to assume it's top, but I'll read off the top ones because we are fans of our friends over at Super Draft. Today is a No House Advantage show, so they're the one right now. Put your No House Advantage money and then go over to Super Draft. That's the order of operations you have to do here. But on Super Draft, some of the top plays, Patrick Mahomes may shock you to hear, even with the multiplier at 1. Looks like a top play. Tom Brady, 1.2x multiplier. Awesemo's number 2 graded play on Super Draft. Travis Kelsey, Tyreek Hill. This is actually a very funny list to read out loud. It's really exactly the order that you might expect when picking these players. But yeah, these are the top 5 plays: Mahomes, Brady, Kelsey, Hill, and Godwin, according to Super Draft projections. And then Harrison Butker right behind them. So there's one if you want to get sneaky. And that's where I'm going to lead to, because Matt, I'm curious your thoughts. This has been a drum that Awesemo's beat a lot in the Showdown shows. I know you've done a good amount of those too. And with Butker, a kicker here who on Super Draft 2.25x multiplier on the other sites, a little bit higher price than the Demarcus Robinsons, the Ronald Jones, all those guys. But the floor there, I feel like it's a pretty safe expectation that he can get to 10 fantasy points, at least in that neighborhood. I feel good getting to Butker, even though the price maybe is a little bit of a squeeze. How are you feeling about Harrison Butker? And is he a guy you would consider a core play for a showdown today, or maybe Ryan Suckup on the other side?
I do like Butker. I think you have to look at him just because of the massive implied team total for Kansas City. Typically, I'm not seeing kickers be as highly owned as they potentially should be. I think people just want to click on the fancy names, even if they're the ancillary pass catchers. So with Butker, when I'm running crunches, he's someone that I'm not trying to really reduce or increase at all. Just what I'm getting with him is fine for me.
Josh, how about you with the kickers? And if you have any overall thoughts on kicker as well, because, Awesemo's mentioned they tend to be undervalued, though for me, I think having read some papers about, I was saying papers like they're academic things, having read some things from people about the showdown.
One of those quality DFS journals that are out there.
Yeah, of course. The Academic Journal of Daily Fantasy Sports had a published paper about normally 2 kickers, 2 defenses not in the winning lineup. So that's one thing that I do tend to group out. I only take 1 kicker, 1 defense. So, but do you have any overall thoughts on these kickers on today's slate and then just overall deployment of kickers for a showdown?
Yeah, so I generally like the kickers more so than the public on a pretty regular basis. So for me, I think Butker and Suckup are both under-owned relative to the field. I guess I prefer Suckup barely, but I have them both as like 24% optimal type guys. Ownership is in like the 16 to 18% range. So I'm not trying to like load up on both of them in the same lineup. There is some context that is important here, but I like rotating through both of them. I think that there are points to be had from the kickers today.
Also, Josh, I feel like I got to put you to work here. We just had, now it's up to 421. We just had 420 likes. So that's a lovely number. But, with 1,600 people in here, I feel like we can do more. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you really fast, Josh, and your beautiful purple hues to tell the people here how they should be hitting the like button for us.
If I'm being perfectly honest, I would rather stick the landing on 420 likes, but that's neither here nor there. So I haven't had the opportunity to beg for likes in a while. It's been all subscribers all the time. And then we hit the 50K mark. So not that we don't want you to subscribe as well. Do that. Subscribe, notification bell, all that good stuff. But let's run those likes up because this is the final NFL show of the season. And we would like to go out with a bang and potentially go out with, a like perhaps. So thumbs up, everybody.
Yeah, there you heard the man. Hit that like button now, and Matt, I feel like I have to ask you one quick question because I know somebody out there's thinking it, and I'm honestly curious too. What is the Super Bowl menu for today? Are we still sticking with the stalwarts, the Four Locos, the Tunas of the world, or are we getting a little more creative for the Super Bowl for this mammoth event in front of us?
I won't lie to you. I thought that Josh was going to say if we get to a certain number of likes that I'll take down a Four Loco, like exactly what happened on Christmas Eve. But unfortunately, I don't have a Four Loco in my apartment today, so that is not on deck. I think I might order a pizza or do something really fancy over here.
There you go.
Really fancy. You're on a show with a man in Josh who has his own pizza oven here, and it's just every day making pizzas to hopefully look like one of the Italian men on the pizza boxes. That's really, I think, Josh's long-term goal.
I'm working on it, man. I'm working on it.
One pie a day. That's really the goal here on the channel. So we'll have a couple more tangents here. He's got to fill 45 minutes, and we'll keep going through. If you have any questions, drop in the YouTube chat, and again, hit that like button. We do appreciate it a bunch here. All right, so we talked kickers. We got to talk about the defenses there. Let's start with the very unsexy plays, because on a slate like this one, a Super Bowl slate, you can justify getting there a little bit more. This guy mentioned, as Laffy, Alex, and Ben all mentioned on the last show, that millionaire maker on DraftKings already full. So you're going to see a lot of casual lineups out there. And Josh, defense is here, relative to the field, relative to maybe a casual audience that's going to play more defense than they should in a spot here, or maybe less even because of the gigantic total. What's your lean on that with the defense today, and a spot that really it's hard to expect them doing much, barring a pick six that could happen easily during the course of the random events of a Super Bowl?
Yeah, not a big fan of the defenses today. In particular, I think the Bucs defense is quite a bit overowned. That's a spot that I will have literally zero of. For the Chiefs, I think that they are basically properly owned. The problem is just Ronald Jones is $400 cheaper than that at the exact same ownership. That is so confusing to me that I can't even really explain it. Ronald Jones is like 3 times as good of a play as the Chiefs defense, and they have the exact same ownership, and Ronald Jones is cheaper. Makes no sense to me. I kind of feel the same way about Demarcus Robinson too, but if you're playing on DraftKings, just skip the defenses.
Matt, do you agree here that you might want to skip the defenses there? Or are you willing to get at least a taste of them on the chance that Brady throwing a pick under pressure seems like a viable outcome? The Bucs defense, for whatever they're worth, they stop the run well. Maybe they force a fumble, take it back somehow. Whatever the weird things that we always see happen in a Super Bowl. Are you willing to get there, or are you finding that the ownership's still a bit too high?
In my large field contest, that's where I'll start playing some of the defenses. Typically, when we have large totals like today, over 55, I'll get less defenses just because we're expecting more scoring, and you really need those crazy events. So in large field, sure, you can mix them in, but again, I'm probably under the field.
Yeah, the field right now for both defenses on DraftKings, according to our most recent run of ownership, which did get an update not that long ago. So get in there at awesemo.com/join for that express package, which will get you all the data for today. But the Chiefs is going to be about 14% owned. The Bucs also going to be 14% owned, though a little bit higher there. So that's the numbers, and I'm going to be under on both too. So I'm with these guys. I think it's worth having a little bit of the Chiefs just in the chance that maybe there's a Tom Brady meltdown somewhere. But for the most part, the field seems a little bit lofty. Let's keep going through the rest of this. And I guess let's talk the QBs now. We've sorted through enough of the crap early, and we have now the marquee, the stake of the slate here. Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, probably the biggest star matchup we've ever had in a Super Bowl, or at least recently that I can think of. And these two guys, to me, I'm building around a lot of them. I'm going to have more Mahomes, almost 100% Mahomes, going to have closer to 75% Brady. Josh, give me your exposures here, or your overall thoughts on what exposure should be, given the fact that it's really hard to imagine at least one of these guys not being a crucial part of today.
Yeah, I think these quarterbacks are actually going under-owned. Mahomes at the captain spot, I don't mind paying all the way up that $18K price tag. I think he's the most frequent captain, and I think that he should be picking up more ownership than he has. And then on the Brady side, while I don't mind getting to him in the captain spot, I think he is wildly under-owned in the utility spot. It's probably like my 3rd or 4th highest ranked leverage play. And it's hard to get leverage on someone that's already 39% owned, but I think it should be significantly higher. So I am very happy to load up on Brady in the utility spot and have a bunch of Mahomes. And again, this all comes back to the fact that like someone like Ronald Jones is 2,200, and it becomes really, really easy to pay up for both quarterbacks today.
Matt, how do you feel here? Is there a QB that you prefer, or are you just basically happy to get as much of these guys as you can fit in within, whatever reason that you deem appropriate?
And that's exactly it. Right now, just looking at our projections, both quarterbacks comfortably project for more than 300 yards. And usually on these showdown slates, you're seeing a ton of ownership come in on the quarterbacks. I think we do have just Tyreek Hill, Kelsey, and some other players drawing away some of that typical ownership. So agree with Josh there that we are getting a little leverage on the signal callers.
Here's a chat. Just wanted to point out real fast. So our boy Pete the Heat Rogers is in chat saying hi, and Thomas Kane saying your UFC guys helped me take down a UFC GPP. Shout out to the fighter you got working with you. Forgot his name, something Junior. So that is Pete Rogers Jr. Pete the Heat is what we call him here as his friends. But yeah, that's it's always the fun thing where it's like, oh, great to help you win, but maybe remember the guy's name who helped you win. That'd be nice.
Way to go, something Junior.
Whatever his name is, Junior Griffey. Pete the Heat Rogers. Root for him and watch all the shows. He and Jason Floyd do a fantastic job as always doing MMA, and hopefully a little more time in our lives to do some more MMA or to take in some MMA content, some PGA content. Not the NFL's wrapped up. I know I will. Let's keep talking about the QBs more. Actually, here's the question for you guys, and I'll ask Matt first. At captain, are you getting to QBs as much? Because there is a popular showdown theory, which is that, taking the QBs at utility tends to be a better move because you're going to normally find an outlier pass catcher as part of the run of events here, especially in a game like this one where the pass defenses, I think, are the weaker part of both teams. Are you getting Mahomes and Brady a lot at captain, or are you more inclined to them to go to them at a utility spot, Matt?
Yeah, for me, this depends entirely on the field size for the tournament. In smaller field stuff, I'm just taking Mahomes and moving on, just putting him at captain. In larger field stuff is where I'll start captaining the pass catchers and trying to gain a little leverage there. So like you mentioned, I do have a little bit less Mahomes and Brady in the captain, and I just have most of them in the utility slot.
Josh, how about you? Do you have a feel here? Are you willing to get more captain with these guys? Or is that just, I wouldn't say a fish move, but certainly one that I think with the ownership that heavily goes to QBs, maybe a better move to play him in utility. How are you feeling about it?
So I like Mahomes either way, but I completely agree with what Matt said. The smaller the field, the easier it is to just put Mahomes in there and call it a day. I don't prefer Brady as much in the captain spot. I would rather get to Tyreek Hill or Godwin or Evans, one of those guys. So I think it's easier to get to Brady in the utility spot. Mahomes, on the other hand, I'm more than okay with locking him down in the captain spot.
Also, one other question that I just feel like is worth addressing that I saw go by in YouTube chat. I don't remember who asked it, but Ronald Jones ownership, we have him at 15%. And then, Josh, I'm going to ask you because I feel like the hard cap here maybe comes into play. Talked about my struggles earlier, but how much Ronald Jones is too much Ronald Jones? And is it a play too that, like, do we feel the casuals will get on Ronald Jones more than the 15% we have? Because certainly DFS wise, watching our shows today, and I'm sure otherwise across the industry, Ronald Jones is going to pop up for a lot of people.
If Ronald Jones is 14% owned, I would rather have like 40.
Matt, do you have a lean here if we're going to say that Jones is, let's say 14 to 20% owned?
Yeah, I was trying to double the field. I have 30 right now.
Okay, so there you go. There's a benchmark to try to hit there if you are sorting through your lineups now. And again, you guys have a lot of time here. We're cutting the show off at 5 p.m. Eastern today. We're not going all the way up. Thank God. Can you imagine if we had to fill 2.5 hours leading up to the Super Bowl?
I would be drunk by that point.
So we could kind of fill in our own way then at that point. It'd just be Josh doing keg stands, showing off his pizza oven.
The pizza oven's getting fired up for today. It wouldn't be keg stands. It would be mimosa chugs, I guess.
Mimosa is always a good move on a football Sunday, no matter what people say about your masculinity. And that's not even me being sarcastic. I hate when people bash mimosas. They are as masculine a drink as any out there, besides Four Loko, of course.
We were just drinking them sitting in the car waiting for brunch.
That's Josh, you have the best married life of anybody I know. I feel like,
Well, like they told us that it was going to be like 30 to 45 minutes and we didn't know what to do. And we had a bit of a tight window. So we just went and bought a bunch of bottles of champagne and solo cups and sat in the car and waited and drank.
Matt, does that sound like love to you? Is that what the dream is? Someone to share Four Locos with in the front seat of a car waiting for dinner?
If I could ever meet a nice woman that would share Four Loko with me, I think I would immediately propose.
You guys are just splitting cans of tuna in the car. It smells fucking terrible.
It's going Lady in the Tramp style. Interlocking arms, feeding each other from a can of tuna. We all want that. We all want that kind of love. Speaking of love, we got a super chat here from Brad Kaufman saying, love this show. Watch every Sunday. In the Millie, would you go Pat, Tom Brady, Brown, Godwin, Jones, Watkins? So he's just given us a lineup. Josh, you see any issues here with this lineup here of, actually, no, I don't even know what his question is because you can't play.
It's not a question. He's just
telling us what his lineup
is. Yeah. Okay. I prefer the Nicole Hardman question that's coming up shortly. I don't know. The lineup looks fine to me, but it's pretty hard to build a showdown lineup that doesn't look good.
And Matt, I'll ask you the other question here from Blue Apples. Do I put Nicole Hardman on captain spot and then put all the studs? So are you trying to line up Nicole Hardman with a bunch of studs? Perhaps if you're doing some casting in the San Fernando Valley.
I would not do that, but you certainly can. We've seen crazy captains win before. You're basically going to be one of a few people that has them. So I don't hate the strategy, but I like getting a little contrarian in different ways.
Also, my goal every show is to get Jordan to break there, and that happened while he was drinking a beer. So I feel like now we can just call the show over, I think.
I would say that getting Nicole Hardman in the captain spot is pretty contrarian for today.
I mean, in fairness, autocorrect, I'm sure, is not very receptive to me, Cole Hardman. So we'll cut you some slack on that one. And we do appreciate the super chat, Blue Apples. And he's been chiming in all day here. And I'm sure knows that Nicole Hardman is not a part of the game.
I mean, to be fair, he couldn't spell apple either. So...
Well, he's intense. He's got a Z on his apple. He's got multiple apples, and he wants people to know about it.
I guess.
It's like an old math problem.
I do like words that end in Z's.
Yeah, that's just edgy. That's what we want. That's the Mountain Dew of letters, I think, putting a Z on the end. How about Nicole Hardman as a play? Because he's one of those guys that's a little bit higher priced than some of the other ones we talked about. 5,600, certainly some pathways to imagine him getting gadget plays. And I did a show with Ben Gretsch, who's another sharp guy at Yards for Gretsch on Twitter, has worked at CBS, and now does some stuff with my pal Peter Overzet. And he had mentioned that Hardman got his most air yards of the year the last time that Kansas City played the Bucs. And, I know Josh, not the biggest air yards fan, but it is sort of a signifier of at least there being, something different going on with Hardman in that game where they took a lot of deep shots. Tyreek certainly benefited the most, but Hardman at his price point, not a lot of ownership on him, the same amount we're projecting for Ronald Jones, basically. Hardman, is he in play at all for you, Matt, given the fact that there are certainly some narratives you could spin, though he's really priced out of any sort of value you can look at if you were to look at the median projection?
Yeah, I like Hardman, and I think it's maybe because the other players in that range are also going to be a little bit contrarian. You can mix it up, but Hardman specifically, he might not play as many snaps, but when he's out there, he is getting those designed plays. We can almost guarantee he will have a few touches just based on his role and his dynamic ability. So even though he's not seeing maybe as many routes or snaps, I do think he receives a few targets. And because of what he brings to the table, there's always a chance he breaks one. So I'm comfortable getting to some Hardman. I won't have a ton of him, but definitely going to have a little bit.
Josh, how do you feel about it? Because I know if you're looking purely at a value perspective, which is normally how you're building your lineups, you're probably not going to see a lot of Nicole Hardman. But from a tournament perspective, knowing the ceiling that's there, at least theoretically, maybe less so Sammy Watkins back, it does seem like Hardman could have some tournament appeal. So I'm curious your thoughts here as a man who likes to play by the numbers.
I think he's the second worst play on the slate behind Cameron Brate.
Okay, interesting. So none of him, I presume that means?
Absolutely zero.
All right, so there's one line drawn in the sand here. And Matt, I'll transition real fast here because Josh gave his take on Cameron Brate. And we talked about Gronk being an interesting play earlier at his price. But Cameron Brate, for you, would you say that he's one of your worst plays on the slate?
I agree with Josh entirely on Cameron Brate. There's a couple things that go into this. I think with Antonio Brown back, we could see less 12 personnel from Tampa Bay. They're going to run some, but I just don't think it will be as much as we saw in the last game. Also, Gronk played more snaps and ran more routes in the conference championship than Brate. Brate did see the targets, and that is important, but I think this has gone too far.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Brate coming off the back issues also, you're right, like the fact that people were watching the box score will see more targets going to Brate, but Gronk ran twice the amount of routes, certainly had more snaps as well. So it's a spot for Gronk here, I think, to bounce back. And we do have, I guess, one other part on the other side of the box score watchers where maybe they see Gronk having that 100-yard day against Kansas City earlier in the year, the game that Tyreek went off. But for me, I think Gronk, we have him projected for 15% ownership. A lot of guys here who we're talking about on the show so far in that 15% range. Gronk, to me, looks under-owned, so I think that's a spot I'd want to get to. And Brate going to have 13% his way, so you're not really getting a discount if you went to him either. Some of the other pass catchers while we're talking here on Tampa Bay, we're sort of flowing narratively here, so hit that like button for us if you can. And also, it only is going to help out this Bucs side of the equation. Josh, if you had to choose one receiver here from the Bucs, if you were to build as a captain in a showdown lineup, let's start there. Is there one guy who seems like the most appealing captain to you out of the Bucs pass catchers? Or I guess if you really were feeling the running backs too?
It would be really difficult for me. I would basically be flipping a coin between Evans and Godwin. I have Godwin as slightly more frequently in the optimal lineup, but because of ownership, I actually think that Mike Evans by a hair is a better play. So just like offsetting those two things, I think it looks super similar. I guess I'm going to be more happy if Godwin is the guy, but honestly, it's 50-50 for those two.
Matt, how are you feeling here? Because projection-wise, Awesemo has Chris Godwin expected to have about 2 more fantasy points with that median projection, but Evans has had a little more touchdown equity throughout the year. Certainly, I think more of a big play guy, at least on paper. Godwin more of the PPR guy historically. Do you have a lean between these two, particularly for playing captain in a showdown?
I would lean towards Godwin. He just had a larger target share throughout the season when he was healthy. And I guess the thing that you could make the argument for Evans, lately he has been banged up and now he has 2 weeks. When these two players are both healthy, they're essentially neck and neck in target share. So with the slight ownership break towards Evans, maybe you could argue there's a little bit of a reason to play him for leverage. But ultimately, I see this similar to Josh. I think both are great plays. And if you're playing multiple lineups, you just play some of both.
Yeah, Evans, I do think it's worth pointing out. For me, when I was running crunches, was not coming up as much because of these guys being at a similar price point. Some of the rules that I put in meant that I was getting more Godwin. So something to keep in mind here. And I would say, for me, I think trying to get a 50-50 split of these guys would be what I would want to do because there are certainly game scripts for both that do benefit pretty well. One guy, though, is going to be less so than these two and certainly a little bit of a different price point as well. Antonio Brown coming off some knee issues probably makes Scotty Miller, probably makes Tyler Johnson less in play. That we can talk about that in a second. But Matt, what's your feel here for Antonio Brown, especially coming off the injury, but accounting for the fact that he has been Brady's safety blanket in a lot of games where Evans and Godwin just haven't seen the results?
I actually like Antonio Brown a lot, and I like him in DFS because he's coming in with lower ownership. He's practicing in full, so I'm expecting him to have a normal role out there. I like him in prop markets. I think he's underpriced, and he's being priced essentially everywhere as if he's going to be a part-time player, and I just don't see it working that way in the Super Bowl after 2 weeks of rest and with full practices under his belt. So I like Antonio Brown a lot. I will be over the field on him.
Josh, where do you stand with Antonio Brown, given the fact that he's going to be, 12 to 15% less owned than the guys we talked about who have more secure roles, but you're definitely getting a reasonable discount, as Matt just mentioned.
Yeah, I have him as a completely neutral play. We have him at 21.7% ownership. He showed up in my Sims at 21.8% ownership. So, I'm pretty neutral on Antonio Brown. He stands out a lot better than Nicole Hardman at $600 more expensive, though.
Nicole Hardman had a tough day when I can't even get with the joke. I was going somewhere dark that maybe Josh would have followed me to, but it's not worth subjecting Matt to after the last time we did a show with poor Matt. We got botted and downvoted, so we got to make sure that Matt has a nice appearance here this time.
Yeah, no one almost cut me loose.
Yeah, we appreciate the kind people in chat today. We appreciate all you guys hanging out with us. And now is the halfway point of the show. So, Josh, I feel like we have to do one more 100-yard to TD pick to close out.
We're going to spin that stupid hat around.
And that's right. And also, as Jordan didn't remind me today because he's too busy enjoying the show, yucking it up, it is money time. So we have to now focus on the most profitable half-hour DFS, but also means 100 yards and a TD picks. And I'm going to say no rules today because it's a showdown. I take whoever you want. Matt, it's just picking whoever you want. As they're going to get a 100-yard and a touchdown today. Who would be your highest probability play to get that number?
I can't remember who I did last time we were on the show together, but I know I picked somebody who was kind of a flyer. I think at this point, I'm legally obligated to talk about Sammy Watkins. But for the purpose of this question, I don't think he's going to get 100 yards. I'm going to take a safe pick and go with Tyreek Hill.
All right, Josh, Tyreek Hill, the bar has been set there. So now what do you want to do? Matt's taking the plus EV pick, and that's really the move here. Now that we don't have Greg here, that nerd dragging us down, pick whoever you want.
Well, I wanted to take Tyreek Hill and just be the guy that was like, hey, I'm going to take Tyreek Hill because he's awesome. That didn't work out. So I'm trying to figure out what would be the most fun. I can't troll anybody with this pick because there's not anybody with enough ownership. So I will go with Travis Kelsey.
Okay, that's a nice leverage on Tyreek Hill with that pick, I would say. And for me, I'll go, like I always like to do on these, a little bit of courage, a little dash of intelligence. Rob Gronkowski.
Nicole Hardman.
Yeah, Nicole Hardman is going to be Rob Gronkowski, I think, is in a nice spot today. We saw the results before, which it does give you a little bit of pause, but one spot that they have given up a lot of production, Kansas City all year long, giving up a 1.5 yards per route cover to the tight end. To the other spots in the field, not so much, actually substantially less. Every single one under 1 yard per route covered. So I think Gronk today puts it down, and we're reminded of WrestleMania Gronk, not this current version of Gronk. The one who's a 24/7 champion. That's the Gronk we're going to see today. All right, so let's see. No good questions in the chat. If you guys have any questions, drop them in the YouTube. We'll pick a few here because we do care. And also worth noting, my money hat today represents the colors of the team that I think will win. So that's the a little bit of red, a little bit of gold. That could be either way.
Hey, by the way, for your Gronk pick, Gronk has 100-yard game since 2018. That game happened against
Tampa Bay Bucs.
Kansas City Chiefs this year.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Okay, that's right. That's what I meant to say. I said it backwards like an idiot because I was drinking a beer. But yeah, that's it. That's so great odds then. 100% hit rate. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah, there's no reason whatsoever that you should regress that to any sort of mean. It happened once, and that is the sort of thing that we would hear a lot. Like, oh, did it the last time.
Yeah, the DVP here looks great for Gronk in this particular step. Other tight ends in the game, we do have to talk about. Let's talk about the Travis Kelsey question that we're going to have here because he's a star play. I think he's very obvious. People are going to plug him in. But Josh, I'll ask you first. If you had to choose, let's say somebody were saying, hey, Josh, I'm going to only let you build around one Chiefs player today. Would it be Kelsey or Tyreek Hill if you had to choose and have 0 of one and however much you wanted of the other?
I would rather have Tyreek Hill. I think actually Travis Kelsey is like my second least favorite captain spot play. I think he's going a little over-owned. I would rather just have Tyreek Hill for $900 cheaper. Now at the utility spot, I think it's a little bit different. I think they're both like 38% of the time optimal type guys. So I don't really have anything on the utility side, but I would just prefer to get to Hill over Kelsey in the captain spot.
Matt, same question to you. Somebody, a very esoteric approach here by a hostage taker has decided to ask you, hey, you only play one of these guys today, Matt. Who is it going to be between Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelsey?
I'm with Josh on this. I like Tyreek Hill a little bit more in the captain as well. But ultimately, it's hard to have any qualms with Travis Kelsey. I think if you want to captain Travis Kelsey, I mean, he broke most tight end records this year. The dude's a complete stud. So no qualms getting there if that's how your lineup shakes out.
Matt, is there any sort of logic here to moving away from Kelsey more? Because part of the reason, and this is just sort of a thought exercise, obviously we're just trying to talk through every angle here as much as we can, but Kelsey during the year, because of tight ends and how bad the position was this year, people really went Kelsey's way and just kind of put him in a lot of times here, and no matter what the price was, no matter all of that. And today on this slate, you can get a guy like Chris Godwin, you can get a Mike Evans and save $2,500. Does Kelsey lose some appeal overall relative to the rest of the pass catchers? Because if we do see a lot of volume going there, maybe in an early Chiefs lead that goes at Tyreek Hill's hands, you could see Godwin and Evans come close to Kelsey, at least relative to price. So does he lose some appeal because of the fact that you don't have to play a tight end?
Not really. I mean, he still saw a lot of metrics that would be near the top of wide receiver rankings. So I think you could just consider him to be, a pass catcher on this slate. He's really used like a wide receiver. His target share was higher than Tyreek Hill's this year. He had a healthy air yard share as well. Josh's favorite stat is up around 26%. And I mean, he's had 100 yards in both playoff games so far. So I think just treating him like a wide receiver makes a lot of sense. But to your point on Godwin, if you're deciding between, Godwin and Kelsey, I do think you're getting not only a break in price, but an ownership leverage point there as well. Same thing goes for Evans and the other Tampa Bay pass catchers. They're all just lower owned than the cheap studs.
Josh, do you feel that way too here? Because if you're taking Tyreek, I think that is part of the logic why is that you're assuming Tyreek can have the outlier day. Maybe Kelsey gives you a solid day in line with what he's done all year long, but you could definitely see if Tampa Bay does come from behind or does have to come from behind, more passing yardage going to Evans, going to Godwin, and definitely for Godwin, a lot more targets. So is that your thought at all with Kelsey? I mean, obviously he's a great play, but is there any logic in maybe moving away from him a bit more?
Yeah, that's a perfect way to detail it out. Like, I would rather just get more Godwin, more Evans at the captain spot. At utility, it's all the same. Like, Travis Kelsey has such a high floor to be really difficult to avoid him in lineups, especially at 11K. I don't even think that price tag is all that problematic. So I would definitely want to get to more Godwin and Evans at the captain spots. But at utility, it's easier to go to Kelsey because I think the production is a little bit more firm. At the captain spot, you're looking for the extremes. And I think that Chris Godwin and Mike Evans can have extreme games. But at the utility spot, I think it's more likely that those two guys fail than they succeed.
A. Dean asking for a DK captain spot, Josh. Do you want Patrick Mahomes or Thad Young, who's been on a great run recently? His rates have been changing, playing some more 5. And I hear that's a take that you have a strong opinion on. So if you had to pick one today, who would it be?
Well, I'm going to put Mahomes there because I'm pretty sure Thad Young will get 0 points in this game.
Thad, how about if we were to grade Thad Young based on his fantasy output yesterday, where he had 26 fantasy points? Who gets more in the captain spot?
Still Mahomes.
Okay, that's fair.
I had people tagging me about Thad Young's game from whatever night it was, Friday night, I guess. It was like, okay, he had like 37 fantasy points and was completely useless. Cool. I don't know why you're tagging me.
He was valuable in some constructs that made that price work, and that's really how I felt about that. Though his role's now shifted around because of all the injuries and guys around, and he looks worse again immediately. So that's why he had the down day yesterday. That's what I will drag to my grave talking about Thad Young.
Or he's $3,500 more expensive than he used to be, and people don't look at prices.
A little bit of column me. That's how things go here in DFS. We haven't talked so much about the Kansas City running backs, and I think now feels like the time here that we've softened up everything. We talked about all the pass catchers, the guys who are very appealing. Kansas City walking into a buzzsaw run defense here that we all know, casual players also know because it's been going on for 2 years now. Tampa Bay shuts down everybody. 80.6 rushing yards per game allowed. That's a number here that maybe doesn't always matter, but it's certainly proof of Tampa Bay's concept here with what they do. Accounting for that, Matt, and accounting for also, ownership not too crazy on Darrell Williams and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but certainly they're represented. How are you feeling about the running backs in these spots? And I guess also, do you find yourself getting to any running back captain, whether it be from Kansas City or from Tampa Bay?
I have a little bit of running back captain. Not a lot, but just a little bit here. As far as the Chiefs backfield goes, I think there's a little more upside for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That's also reflected in price. In that conference championship game, I thought that Clyde Edwards-Helaire might rest a little bit more just because he'd been banged up. And if the Chiefs handled the game, and it wasn't a huge margin of victory, but that game was in control for Kansas City. They didn't necessarily have to get Clyde Edwards-Helaire out there for extended run. They could use Darrell Williams in that instance. So I think there's a little bit of potential here that Clyde Edwards-Helaire could see extended run. I think Darrell Williams is basically locked into a timeshare at best.
Josh, how are you feeling about it? Because the projections that Alex has right now greatly favor Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but we have seen Darrell Williams be the guy where if Kansas City, does take a lead, it seems like, at least based on the most recent run they've had, maybe Darrell gets some more carries and has that, ability to keep the clock running. There's, I think, a logic for these guys here, but how are you feeling about Edwards-Helaire and Darrell?
I would rather have Clyde Edwards-Helaire than Darrell Williams. I don't want to have any of these guys in the captain spot. I think that they're either properly owned or over-owned. I don't really see any value in the running backs in the captain spot. So if I'm ranking them just in terms of like how much I would like them ignoring public ownership, Fournette is the highest ranked running back for me. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a close second. And then in theory, Ronald Jones is my top running back, but he's also like less frequent just from a fantasy point perspective. So I love getting to the value of Jones, but I think those other two guys are just better general plays from a total fantasy point perspective.
We've got about 20 minutes left in our show, and then you guys have about another 90 minutes past that until the Super Bowl kicks off. So take advantage of No House Advantage's deal that they have going right now, where if you use the promo code Awesemo on there, you get $25 in free play without having to deposit a dime. And right now, their contest that has a $25 entry, their $25,000 Super Bowl Showdown with $10K to first. It's only 70% full, a little bit less than that. So go over to nohouseadvantage.com or download No House Advantage in the App Store and use that promo code Awesemo when you sign up, because that is a $25 free play you can instantly use and get in here. And this decent chance this one, I guess, can fill over the next hour, 2 hours and change, but also it's a free entry. Like, there's really no reason to be doing it, and that's a big part of it here. If it overlays, it's great. If it doesn't overlay, you're still getting a free entry. So play over there and use our free projections, which are available on the site, and I'll drop a link in the chat, even though we have the Nightbot doing that too. Here's one link for you guys: free No House Advantage projections. Check them out on there. Let's keep going through, I guess, the Kansas City pass catchers. And one guy we haven't talked about at all today is Sammy Watkins, who sort of a value-ish play, a little bit more expensive than DeMarcus Robinson, coming off of some injuries that have limited him over the last couple weeks and kept him out of games. But Watkins at this price point, if he's running routes, certainly a pivot to just game-wise, thinking about Tyreek Hill. If he is double covered somehow, if they somehow inhibit him, they're going to go to Kelsey. But then after that, they'll go to Sammy Watkins, and that opens up some opportunity. So, Matt, where do you land with Sammy Watkins here coming off the injury? And do you find him more appealing than the McCole Hardmans or the DeMarcus Robinsons of the world, who are going to be similarly owned, and in the case of Robinson, a little bit cheaper?
I've lost more money on Sammy Watkins than any other player this year, and there's no way it's close. Basically, anytime we get these premier quarterbacks, like the same thing for Aaron Rodgers too, and like with MVS, anytime we have a cheap attachment to one of these signal callers that's on the field for every snap, I just play them in stacks. So this week, there is a little more concern with Sammy Watkins, obviously having not played since the regular season. And interestingly, we saw Byron Pringle play an extended role in their previous game. I think there's a chance that Sammy Watkins goes back into his every down role, but I also think there's a chance that maybe there's been a role change in favor of someone like Pringle. So I think he carries more uncertainty today specifically.
Yeah, I think that makes some sense. Josh, how are you feeling about it?
So there's also obviously a little bit of risk on Watkins. We don't really know what we're going to be getting here, but I think that he is a bit under-owned. So he projects pretty similarly to Butker and Suckup, similar salary tier. Butker at $4K, Suckup at $3,800, Watkins coming in at $4,200, so a couple $100 more expensive. But you also have a different sort of ceiling on someone like Sammy Watkins in comparison to one of the kickers. So he's actually in a really nice tier to me because I hate Brait, I hate Williams, I hate Hardman. So from $6,200 Antonio Brown, to me, there's a huge gap, and Sammy Watkins is at the top of that next tier. So I actually want to get to him quite a bit more than the field. I see Sammy Watkins as like a 30-ish% guy today.
Also, get reminded by our guy, Jordan Frank, who's broken a lot of the stuff behind the scenes, helping our tech team get the stuff in line that they need. And our No House Advantage optimal lineups page is back up today as well. I think he's going to drop a link in chat here momentarily for you guys. But if you are extra lazy and don't want to do anything while also getting some of these lineups into your life at No House Advantage, or if you're just trying to get some overlay on there, it's really still that big showdown contest that's full to $25 entries. Check out the optimal lineups page. Actually, I'll throw it in a second here, but let's make sure to use that here, because No House Advantage, we're making it about as simple as possible for you to play one. So if there's any inhibitor at all for you, use that optimal lineups page and plug them in yourself. The other tight ends here for Kansas City, I just feel like I just want to circle back on them. We talked about Ricky Seals-Jones. We talked about, we have not talked about Nick Keiser, who's $200, and we're going to fill 15 minutes here one way or another. So Matt, the cheap garbage tight ends for Kansas City, do you see any use for them at all here, given that it is a high total and maybe there's some trickery afoot that results in one of these guys having a touchdown at least?
I have 0 of these guys. I will say Andy Reid likes to use that little shovel pass. We've seen it used to like Anthony Sherman before. There's a chance. The chance is too low for me to take a shot on it.
Josh, I know your thoughts already, but say them for me real slow here. Nick Keiser, Ricky Seals-Jones, any use at all for the other super dirt cheap pass catchers for Kansas City?
Yeah, oddly enough, I have a ton of both Keiser and Ricky Seals-Jones. I can't get them out of my lineup at this point.
Yeah, the Keiser part is really the one that people miss out on a lot. He's been out there running routes, and Ricky Seals-Jones, as Josh mentioned, noted gambling expert cousin Sal, been all over it recently, so yeah. It's got to be a great bet.
Do you remember what the prop is? It's like over. No, never mind. I know what it is. It's Ricky Seals-Jones to catch the final pass of the game.
What are the odds on that?
Infinite, probably.
You put $1 down, you win infinite money, and they have to cover
give you
forever.
the key to the city.
Yeah, you get all of the money from the sports book that day.
Thus spake Zarathustra. Boy, what a name on YouTube. Is Yelder an option as well? Matt, we've covered the other guys, but I didn't mention Dion Yelder, and maybe he was your sneak play. So do you find that maybe Dion Yelder could be the secret recipe here in the way that Nick Keiser and Ricky Seals-Jones are not?
I am going to have 0 of all these players.
Okay. Josh, how about you? Now that we've introduced Dion Yelder into the mix, this is what
I don't even know what that is. I thought they typed Yeldon wrong and they didn't know that the Bills were in this game.
Yeah, no, if you are going to play one of them, I feel like Nick Keiser would logically be the one. And Ricky Seals-Jones did run some routes in the conference championship game, but you are playing very narrow margins. So probably wise to heed these guys' advice and not play much of any of them. We have one chat here, which I thought was interesting. And here we go. This is the spam coming in hot and heavy. Where did it go now? No QB strategy. Our boy David exposing the motives, talking about it in chat. And Matt, I'll ask you first. Is there any way in the world where you wouldn't play a single QB from this game in the hopes of just getting away from the massive ownership that are going to go to both Mahomes and Brady in both captain and utility spots?
In the context of Showdown and your large field tournaments, this is a strategy that can be profitable because you're not going to be duplicated as much. So basically what you're hoping for in this situation is a low scoring game environment, maybe a couple defensive scores or something like that. And really overall, just a low total game. I don't think that happens. We have a total sitting at 55. We have Mahomes and we have Tom Brady, but that's not why you're taking the strategy in the first place. You're doing it because no one else is.
Josh, how about you? Do you feel like there's a world where, and I guess, if we were to put a number on it, how many lineups would you want to have no QBs in a way to immediately get different, but also probably cut down the likelihood of something happening given the total in this game and the fact that these two teams are very pass dominant?
0.
Okay.
There's no way that I'm making a lineup that doesn't have one of Tom Brady or Pat Mahomes in it today. I don't even know how I could get to it.
I get the logic. Like I get, people hand building. You're like, oh, what's one way that I can immediately do it? And I think to me, one thing that I would consider doing and would be, maybe playing a Tampa Bay pass catcher at captain and not going to Brady in the lineup, because I think that is one outcome that could happen. But in terms of having no QBs, I think it's pretty unlikely. And I'm on the same page as these guys.
Could you imagine how much this game sucks if neither quarterback is in the winning lineup on one of these contests? Good God, it's got to be a dumpster fire of awful.
Well, you know what it would be like? It would be that Rams-Patriots Super Bowl from a couple of years ago where Belichick just was ahead of everything McVay was trying to do and made Jared Goff look terrible. And then it was, I think, what was the total in that game? It wasn't even, did they get to 30 points in that game combined? I feel like, Matt, you must know this offhand.
That was a horrific game. I literally fell asleep in it.
Yeah. That was one of the worst ones. I don't see that happening based on what, like, there's no Belichick here who's going to be like, yeah, here's how we stop everything. Like, I think they're going to try their best and probably fail miserably. And it's going to be, like a low scoring game for these teams. I guess for my money would be like a 48-point game would be about as low scoring as it can get. But do you have any read on that at all, Matt? Like, what do you think is the worst possible outcome here where everything goes wrong? Like, what's the total in that spot?
I think like worst case scenario in this game is Mahomes really feels the effects of losing two of his starting offensive linemen and two of the better ones, and Tampa Bay can generate pressure on him. I don't think this happens, but I think if you're just playing the millie and looking for these sort of alternate outcomes where you're gaining a ton of leverage, that's one thing that you could maybe look to as an edge, just the fact that he's playing without some of these offensive linemen.
Yeah, I think that makes some degree of sense there. And Josh, how about you? If you had to find a world where everything goes poorly here, what would you say is the total that would be the lowest you can imagine?
Well, I think that it would be linked with like Pat Mahomes having to leave the game for an injury, and we have to deal with Chad Henne, and that will really drive the total down. So something along those lines. If Pat Mahomes and Tom Brady take all of the snaps at quarterback, barring any like trick plays and stuff, I don't know, like north of 40 pretty easily. I like the over in the game.
All right, so we've covered most of the aspects here, and I'm trying to think what else we can hit on at this point that would be new and exciting. And Matt, I'll throw it to you first, but if you had to pick a fade of the slate, one guy, and I just always like going back to this idea of some hostage taker, which honestly, given our YouTube chat, sometimes it seems like it wouldn't be crazy if somebody was just like so mad and came and found us and hunted us down and demanded our picks. But some guy was like, hey, Matt, I got to fade somebody here. He's really angry at you. He wants to know who's the one guy you would fade on the slate and give it to this person who's just dying, who's asking for a reason.
Dude, this hostage scenario was brought up one other time on this stream. Someone asked me in the chat if, I think it was the day I gave the tour of my apartment. They asked if I was being held hostage in here, but I'm not. My fade of the day is Cameron Brate, though.
All right, Josh, how about you? If you have this one fade of the day that somebody's demanding, who would it be?
It's Cameron Brate as well for me. I think he grades out as the worst play on the slate for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's now we're really lining up a Cameron Brate 3-touchdown day here, but I think it would probably be Cameron Brate for me too, just because that's a play that just the price point doesn't make sense to me given what we've seen in the last few weeks. And, I am really reluctant to ever call anybody like something as a fish play or whatever like that. But Cameron Brate, I think with the price being where it is, with the fact that he ran half the routes, the fact that he's coming off of a back injury too, that as we saw with Evan Fournier the other day in the NBA, could just flare up and keep you out of a game with no notice. Cameron Brate to me, I think would be a bit of a risk here that I wouldn't be willing to take. So I'm with you guys on that. Let's go the other way. Matt, if there were a lock play on the slate, and again, we don't believe in locks here on the channel. DFS is a world of infinite outcomes. That's why people often find it so confusing. But if you had to put a lock play in on this slate, could be anybody, could be very obvious. Who would it be?
Your locks are the quarterbacks, man. They just have such good projections. I think you play Mahomes, you play Brady if you can play them both. And if you're looking for a player who's a little more out there that I particularly like, I think it's Antonio Brown. Again, he's just being priced in DFS and in the betting markets like he's going to be a part-time player today. And I just don't see that with a full practice.
Josh, if you had to give a lock here, again, accounting for all the things I talked about, where locks are not a thing that you do intentionally and certainly something that maybe you stumble upon. And, who would it be for you in this particular slate?
So I agree that the quarterbacks have to be the first two people you're looking at, whether that's Mahomes, Brady, or both. They grade out better than anybody else. They have so many weapons that I think it would be hard for them to not get there. But I also think that answer is incredibly unfun to give.
Yeah,
Lock feels crazy when I say this, but Ronald Jones.
How much? So you still, but 40% Ronald Jones is where you are. I feel like we need to just draw those two lines, but that's an interesting thought.
So the reason that I say it is because if we really believe that he's 14% owned and I have like a truly excessive amount of Ronald Jones, I'm not even all that upset if it doesn't go the way that I want it to, because he's not expensive enough for it to truly kill your lineup. Like, you're clearly not winning whatever big contest you're in if he doesn't get in the end zone. But from like a cashing perspective, not having a great $2,200 person in your lineup is not the death sentence that it needs to be. So if I were going to lock something in, I think that he looks like as good of a play as possible outside of the 4 best guys in this game, and you get it at 0 ownership.
Who is the most likely guy? And I'll ask you first, Matt. Who's the most likely guy under Jones' price points to outscore Ronald Jones? I think that's kind of an interesting question because we're all on the same page here. We're going to play more Ronald Jones that we're comfortable with, and it's going to be relative to all of us with that. But if you were to go a different direction here, and let's say all the sharp players are feeling the same way that we do, who would be the guy that you would go to instead of Ronald Jones to try to beat him out?
It would probably be Byron Pringle, just on the uncertainty that maybe that role change is consistent. And we don't know this for a fact. He's a guy that had a 3.5% target share on the season, but he did run 32 routes in the conference championship. He played 52 snaps. That was more than Demarcus Robinson, and it was more than Mecole Hardman. Sammy Watkins coming back does throw a bit of a wrench into this, but again, there is a chance that this is now his role. It's not a high chance, but I mean, I'm willing to take a shot on it.
Josh, how about you? Is there one guy that you feel like has the best potential to outscore Ronald Jones if people were trying to fade some of our picks and some of our takes here, and also really fading what the data says about Ronald Jones at his price point?
Yeah, so I guess I'm in the same boat as Matt, but I would say that it's Demarcus Robinson over Pringle, but sort of either one of those two guys are the kind of direction you're trying to go, the random-ish Chiefs wide receiver.
Yeah, Demarcus Robinson is the guy that I have the most exposure to under Ronald Jones. And to get a little bit of Tyler Johnson, who I think there are some people out there who've made compelling cases for Tyler Johnson's role might not be affected by having Antonio Brown back in. Scotty Miller really ran more of the Antonio Brown routes, whereas Tyler Johnson gets a couple of gadget plays, really targeted his way per game. So Robinson to me would be the higher outcome play, but Johnson is somebody that I have a little bit of exposure to. And it's still going to be Ronald Jones by a landslide for anybody in that 2,200 or less price range for me. Let's see. We've got a question here about the prop play for Harrison Butker field goals. I guess over 1.5 is what Zach's wondering in the YouTube chat. Matt, do you have a feel here for Harrison Butker's field goals over? Is this one you've been following closely?
It's not what I've been following closely. If I haven't really looked at this too closely, but if I had to just take a pick off the cuff, I would say over on that, just with the amount of points projected to be scored in this game. So that's my lean. I haven't looked into it too closely though.
The over is minus 155, so I think you're probably taking the sharp side there. And there are definitely some ways that Tampa Bay does keep Kansas City from scoring. They do bring a lot of pressure, so maybe that makes things uncomfortable early here with the usual Super Bowl jitters that'll come. Josh, you don't have a feel for that, or do you have one at all about Harrison Butker, the over on 1.5 field goals?
I do not have a feel on that, but given the way that I normally feel about these guys in showdown contests, give me the over.
People also asking about Le'Veon Bell, Yazel Hebrew saying nobody mentioned Bell. LaShawn McCoy, another guy who maybe pops up if you are just running an optimizer and seeing that he has at least some projection on him. So the aged running backs at all, Matt, do you see a glory day here for Le'Veon Bell or LaShawn McCoy while we are covering every possible angle of this game? I
think you need an injury for either of them to play, like more than 2 snaps.
Yeah, I think you can get to them if you're doing 150, just putting in one lineup in your like doomsday scenario lineup, but that's where I would go with it. And Josh, for you, any LaShawn McCoy or Le'Veon Bell, I ask you these questions already knowing the answer, but sometimes you just have to do it.
Can you hit me with that one again? I was reading chat.
LaShawn McCoy or Le'Veon Bell, do you find either of them in your lineups today?
No, not at all.
All right. And got about 3 minutes left here. So let's just do our final pick here. And Matt, give me the logic. Give me everything here. What would be your pick for this game straight up?
I like Kansas City against the spread, and I actually really like the under in this spot. I think a lot of public money is coming in on the over, and it's a ton of points. So I'm going to take the under in Kansas City.
Josh, how about you? Do you have a feel here for who wins this game? And then I guess how the game looks overall?
Kansas City in the over, baby.
All right. This guy's got the fake name actually of Josh. That's fun. I'm glad that I'm getting roped into your bot spam.
That's not a bot. That's me, man.
You type really
I just really
fast,
want to
Josh.
tear you down a peg at our final NFL game of the year.
That's just me, man.
For me, I think I'm expecting this one. So I really, this might be my fandom coming in, but I do think this game hits the over. I feel like it just lives up to the hype of the shootout here. Maybe there were some ugly moments in it, but I think it's the over. I think it's Kansas City winning because I just don't think Tampa Bay has the firepower to keep up or Tom Brady's ability to keep up. So that's going to be my pick there. Last plug for No House Advantage. Make sure to go over there. Use the promo code Awesemo because that is a $25 free play you can get. That'll basically be one entry in their Super Bowl Showdown tournament on there. Just $25K guaranteed and $10K to first. And then we also have the optimal lineups page, which we linked earlier. You can check that out if you just want to pull a lineup straight from there. If you want to put in a bunch of entries, just do a CSV upload. You can do that with No House Advantage. So play at nohouseadvantage.com or sign up on the App Store by downloading No House Advantage with the promo code Awesemo. $25 free play, no deposit required. Matt, give people the plugs before we call it quits. Anything you have coming up here that you want to tell the people about?
College basketball projections and articles every single day, my friends. If you would like to take a little stroll down college basketball lane, we have you covered.
Josh, how about you? What are the plugs besides, I presume like me, a lot of NBA coming up here on this YouTube channel?
Yeah, a lot of NBA, including the debut of The Process show starting on Tuesday because I didn't want to do it tomorrow, the day after the Super Bowl, because it felt like it would have been hard. Every morning, Monday through Friday at 6:30 a.m. Eastern time, I'm going live just to stream exactly what I'm doing to prep for the day. I'm going through rotations and rosters, projecting out minutes for each team, and doing the entire basis of my projections for the day as a live stream at 6:30 a.m. Eastern time. So join in for that one.
Yeah, that's going to be a worthwhile show. That was something that I had actually pitched as potentially doing before the deeper dive. Not that I wanted to do it, but I just thought it was a good idea. And now they got Josh doing it. So that's probably the best guy you can have walking through and actually seeing what it looks like every day for what an Awesemo, for what any of us who are hosting the show and do our own projections, what we're all looking at. So it's going to be a helpful one. Make sure to tune in, subscribe to the notification bell to know when that goes live. And yeah, go check out No House Advantage, follow at Awesemo_com. And more than anything, we hope you guys have a great Super Bowl, hopefully a profitable one. But pay attention to the news here coming up in the last 90 minutes. Play at No House Advantage. We'll see you guys again soon. Good luck.